Exoterica, 365,250,000. As through the deep glens of a parched mountainside rageth wondrous blazing fire, and the deep forest burneth, and the wind as it driveth it on whirleth the flame every whither. Homer, the Iliad. Act 1, Dragon Flame, by Fishing in Space. You've asked me, so gather round, and I'll tell to you the tale of the first flame and the story of that daughter of the sun so many suns ago. It was in that endless Fimbulvetter where the sun, frozen in the heavens above, as if simultaneously hidden under a sheet of ice, her rays dulled by a warmth that would not pierce the snowy foam. The glacial cold of the Pleistocene proved indomitable, and the dreary, bleak, dark night of the world threatened to end this species we call Homo erectus. Upright man, your ancestors. This is a story of one who would set the world ablaze. In a dream, gifted by a trickster who stole it from the gods, an accident of nature, whatever the means, imparted from sun to human the knowledge of fire. A cult arose, blazed to life, branded forever a deep inner desire to burn everything. The old man knocked the used Cavendish tobacco from his wooden pipe, dumping its ashy contents into the fireplace and packing a fresh shred of rum-scented leaf. He ignited the pipe with a match lit by that same fireplace, gave it a few puffs to get the smoke going, and discarded the stick in the same ceremonious way he had likely been doing for as far back as memory could retrace. He finally spoke again, resuming his musing. People think of those old human ancestors as poor and timid creatures huddled in caves and hovels, scared of their own shadows, terrified of an unknown world full of predators waiting to chew on their flesh and bones. The old man almost spat the words out, incredulous the way one does when wielding the truth against a misconception. 1 million years ago there were as few as 1,000 of your ancestral species alive, certainly no more than 10,000, all living in East Africa. It's easy to romanticize that all of these people were together, the last of their kind in one community. More realistically, there were many families scattered around eastern and southern Africa, but all it would take is one of these groups, one tribe. He repeated those last two words. One tribe, one member of one tribe who had a sudden thought. Burn it all. The old man dwelled for a minute, nursing his pipe, inhaling the smoke and blowing rings. He watched as they faded. Keep in mind back then, and really only up until recently, that humans lived in matriarchal societies the way all other animals do. It would have been a woman with a thought, a single woman who changed the course of humanity and the earth forever. She's the most important person in the entire history of the world, and we'll never know her name. He leaned back in his chair. This was the way of the old man. Sporadic ruminations followed by silent contemplation with loosely chained together stories. I dream of her sometimes, the daughter of the sun, the sorceress who defeated the ice age of the Pleistocene. She gathered her tribe on one solar eclipse day. Mind you, humans had already been using fire for some time. 1 to 2 million years, though in small doses, not yet mastered the little suns that could be made with sticks and stones. From her revelations, with all the fury of a volcano, she gave to her people a mission. The earth was significantly colder than it is today. It was in one of those long glacial periods, you see. It was as if the sun was entombed in a coffin of ice. As the daughter of the sun, she made it her sole purpose in life to free that flaming bringer of light in the sky, the hearth of earth. The old man absent-mindedly toyed with his whiskey tumbler. It seemed as if he had forgotten the story, but at once he drained the glass and started again, a gleam of the fireplace reflecting in his yellow eyes. Several important geologic and biological events occurred during the Pleistocene. Number 1 is the end of the last glacial period, and number 2 is the spread of humans to every continent. Number 3 is the extinction of every other hominid species. Number 4 is the formation of grasslands. All of these sequences of events are directly correlated and of course include many other changes of climate, large animal movements, plant life, and the cycles of the earth. The old man proceeded to weave the story that started with the cult of fire and sun. There's little to no evidence of pre-Pleistocene burnings of vegetation. It doesn't exist. Fire is not a common occurrence with vegetation of the pre-Pleistocene era. You could say that a lack of natural fire resistance is a trademark of pre-Pleistocene plant ecology. Lightning and volcanoes represent the most plausible source of fire, but no such wildfire has ever been found in support of this. Small fires, at best, but not wildfires. In other words, fire is a signature of human activity. Fire is a forensic fingerprint unique to humans. Before 3 million years ago, no evidence of vegetation burnings. Even the fire use over the course of the 3 and 2 million year mark were limited. It wasn't until 1 million years ago that fire became unleashed in its full destructive capacity. The old man leaned forward in his chair, preparing to dive into the full narrative. He cleared his throat, took several drags of his pipe, and began. Roughly 1 million years ago, Homo erectus lived in East Africa, where temperatures on average were colder in most of the world, but warmer in that region. The cradle of humanity, as it is called. Eden. Despite the current ice age, Homo erectus lived in a warm and wet grassland. That grassland had started to form over the last 1 million years from human activity with the advent of fire. These were small-scale fires, used little more than clearing local vegetation. Australopithecus may very well have been the first hominid species to use fire, though only to a limited extent. It was Homo erectus that really wielded flame as their primary tool. Excuse me, you need the full story from the beginning. Remember this as you settle in, warm next to the fire. History is made by individuals, not vague agents that existed purely to fill the space from before you were born. The legacy they leave, the strings and paths they create, people, characters that shed blood and tears, choices they made, decisions, consequences. 365,250,000. That is the number of sunrises between now and that day. One that I remember like yesterday, and to me, a day like any other. Excerpts from the Journal of Dr. Hector Vasan, May 1st. The deck layout is finalized. Hallelujah. The view over the backyard will be perfect. I decided to get the new grill once the deck is finished. I think a 4th of July party will be perfect for it. The contractors start on Monday. May 7th. Like other patients of mine referenced in this personal diary, I shall continue to uphold a veneer of doctor-patient confidentiality, so I will refer to this current patient with the cognomen Jane Doe, not to be confused with the other 3, or maybe 4, female patients I have previously written about. While this is more about my feelings on the sessions and less my patient, I do want to include a few generic descriptions on this Jane so future reviews can recall these memories. This Jane Doe is petite, with rather unkempt dark hair hanging to her shoulders. Her bangs have grown out, so they almost reach her eyes. Of course, it was her eyes that leapt out to me on first impression. The color was a tint of hazel, but it was not the color which caught my attention. No, it was the expression behind the eyes, the window to the soul, as it were. Coined by Billy Shakespeare, if I'm not mistaken. Quite fascinating how much we read into another's eyes, regardless of if it is true or not. As a psychologist, I often use facial cues for clues into a patient's state, whether to prod for more information, or if something is being held back. Naturally, one must keep in mind not to overdo it. My favorite quote on this subject is from Cicero. The face is a picture of the mind, as the eyes are its interpreter. So Jane's eyes had a look of burden and weariness. She also had bags under the eyes and all around appeared quite haggard. Now this probably would not merit enough for me to write in my diary except for some additional factors. First, she is a convicted arsonist suffering from fire-setting behavior. Personally, I prefer the term pyromania, but one must respect the wider community's preference, ever-changing as it may be. This isn't so unusual. About a third of all arsonists are female. Less prevalent for that gender is schizophrenia, but I suspect she suffers from that too. Early as this diagnosis might be, there is an indication. Jane would be my first patient with both symptoms. She refused to talk for much of the session. Yesterday's recording is available if I should want to review the sound of my voice, which I don't particularly like. Strange how the path vibrations take to our ears can drastically alter the timbre of a voice. What clues me to the possibility of schizophrenia was one of the few things she said. I was told to. She wouldn't elaborate at the time, but this was just our first session, and like I wrote, I think she was too tired to properly engage. May 12th. I researched Jane on social media in preparation for our next session. I wanted a better background of her past. Her official record is clean up until the arson conviction. Her socials paint a pretty standard average life. Evidence of friends, good family relationship, a decent college, and a fine job after graduation. It all points toward a clear, radical change in behavior that I again suspect as schizophrenia. It's funny, well, sadly unfortunate, how abrupt life can depart through sudden chemical changes beyond our control. In other news, construction is delayed again. Problem with the building materials. Dad isn't with us anymore, but I know what he would say. A man only depends on himself. Do the deck yourself. Like I got the time. Sorry, Dad, I decided to become a doctor instead of a carpenter. Still, plenty of time for them to finish before Independence Day. May 28th. I wrote a little about Jane Doe, arsonist, earlier this month, but my earlier description of her has thoroughly changed. She has a lot more energy, her hair kempt and those terrible bangs trimmed. Our sessions are engaging with good back and forth. She's very upfront and forthcoming. In sum, a radical departure from our first session. What troubles me is no indication of whatever propelled her for the ring of arsons. At first, I thought she was hiding past behavior, but everything I have reviewed outside of the sessions corroborate her stories. There is no history of animal abuse. Parental testimonies support this. She had a dog throughout her childhood before dying her last year of high school. Euthanized for medical reasons at the age of 14. Jane never suffered from suicidal ideations, which is another common trait for fire setters. No substance abuse or any indication of any personality disorder. Had I not seen her prior physical state, I would have assumed the police apprehended the wrong perp. She refuses to explain her actions. That is the only thing she remains guarded about. She says stress from her job caused her temporary craziness. Honestly, I am not sure where to go from here, since she still has mandatory court-appointed sessions with me. The Shade of the Fairies by Diana Condavive. Just as Drita found herself separating from her mother, the sun was at the furthest point from its own. Instead, she found herself play-fighting with thorn-laden sword sticks among her cousins. "Join and help me, or prepare to die," she said, swinging hers in a circle overhead. They all bolted for the water jugs toward the Crani, the lifeblood of these cursed mountains. Not long later was she braiding flower crowns with the girls, casting hers aside at an offhand remark, and finding herself weaving through a thicket, the burden of expectation forcing her into solitude. On that day, she had been following the trail of bees while listening to the forest's celebratory rain song. The gnarled, twisted oak's outstretched arms and buzzing heart gave it a ferocity that stunned her. She felt a torrential storm reverberate through her bones upon approach, noticing the clump of warriors settled on the ground. Her panting filled the air instantly. Drita couldn't stay long enough to see the wasp cooking among the determined bees. The wasp had picked off several of them, stirring one brave soul and then another in her defense, the cascading behavior sweeping across the hive. Drita felt as if the Zana conjured the scene and were chiding her at her heels. Breathless, with hair standing on end, She returned to the doorway where her mother, grandmother, and village woman huddled around her aunt. The songs of jubilance were replaced by ones of intense grief, layers of light and love ringing off the ends of bell-shaped skirts. Tattooed, streaking suns of her grandmother's hands gripped her aunt, and that terrible cry resounded in Drita's chest. Her hot tears crystallized a promise, an oath to smother the sacrifice of her own. Heroes and Legends by Fishing in Space. Dragons are the oldest muse of human imagination, the first fantasy. Long before words could describe such a creature, they were drawn and carved into stone and painted in caves. Dragons are also the finale, the last step to every theory. Every idea, taken to its end point, will feature dragons. Do you wonder why? What is a dragon? At the eclipse point, it is said a dragon swallows the sun. The old man leaned back in his rocking chair, letting the sinusoidal motion set the pace for his stories. The greatest evil are called dragons, as are the greatest heroes. Dragons are demonic destroyers, greedy hoarders, kidnappers of princesses, and the banes of villages. Knights will quest to slay them, wizards will ride them to the top of their towers. Dragons sleep in caves and mountains, swamps, and deep in the ocean. Some gods are dragons, some dragons are gods, the benevolent guardians of rivers and forests. They are bringers of storms and winds. They are the cause of disease, of volcanoes and tsunamis. Dragons also protect against those calamities. Great warriors and living legends are called dragons. Tyrants and cruel kings are called dragons. Dragons encircle the earth, dragons live underground. Dragons stalk the oceans, dragons grant wishes. They breathe fire and ash, poison and ice. Their wings can shade the sun, their scales are impenetrable. Their eyes behold forgotten truths. Monoliths and temples are erected in their honor. Ceremonies all over the world praise the dragon, while other rituals depict the slaying of a dragon. Dragons announce their coming as thunder and earthquakes, raging fires, or silently in a howling wind. Symbols of royalty, power, wealth, wisdom, primordial creators and keepers of lore. The old man reclined his head, looking at the memory. I witnessed a conversation between Confucius and Lao Tzu. I could not help but eavesdrop two legends meeting. Confucius went on to describe the conversation to his disciples as this, and I think better words could not be said. Birds can fly but will fall at the hunter's arrow. Fish can swim but will be hooked by the fisherman. Beasts can run but will drop into people's nets and traps. There is only one thing that is out of man's reach. That's the legendary dragon. A dragon can fly into the sky, ride on clouds, dive into the ocean. A dragon is powerful, yet so intangible to us. Lao Tzu is a dragon, and I'll never understand him. Act 2. Excerpts from the Journal of Dr. Hector Vasan, June 18th. Perhaps the first real, earnest conversation I've had with Jane. It was sudden and a strange conversation. Our banal chatting, which comprised most recent sessions, ended in a silence that neither of us felt prepared to break through. She stared outside the window for a minute, just enjoying the bright sunshine coming through the window. Abruptly, she asked me what was life. Completely caught me off guard. But she had a persistence to asking me how we knew something was alive. My powers of recollection from university biology failed me. I gave some basic answer, something about the ability to self-replication. Are viruses alive? Was her response. I told her no, very confidently, but I could not defend my position. She mused aloud that viruses reproduced. I admitted that was true, but viruses could not do so by themselves. They depended on actual living microorganisms. She retorted that plenty of parasites reproduced only through other host species. Normally, I would have changed the subject to something appropriate, away from a distracting rabbit hole, but I got something in her tone, hard to describe. Imploring? Hint of desperation? To be proven wrong? Regardless, I ended up debating with Jane back and forth on the subject of life, alone with my thoughts. I admit I struggled to keep up. Every answer I conjured, she rebutted. She never raised her voice, but I have not seen her so focused on the conversation before. In the end, I practically conceded that maybe viruses should be declared a living organism like bacteria. Jane hardly reacted, instead visibly withdrawing to stare out the window. Ultimately, I don't think either of us left the conversation satisfied. June 20th. I admit to knowing little about construction, but looking at the framework of my future deck strikes me as off. I keep looking at it and I don't see the blueprints coming to life. I don't want to be that guy, so maybe I'll just trust the process. Isn't that what I tell my patients? June 22nd. Something has been nagging the back of my mind for the last couple of days, a prickling in my subconscious that has made me toss and turn the last couple nights. I liken it to that one summer, 15 or 16 years old, where I got a popcorn kernel stuck between two teeth. No matter my efforts, I could not pry it out. It remained a dull pressure always on the edge of my consciousness. I think my parents were away for the night, so I was left alone, which probably was for the best. Can only imagine Dad's recommendation. Like every time a tooth was loose as a kid, he always tied string to the door to yank it free. Once, when I was 8, I had to get surgery because he pulled it way before it was ready. Regardless, none of my efforts succeeded getting the kernel out, and at last, tired and upset, I went to bed, trying to ignore the discomfort. The next morning, the kernel popped out almost immediately. All it took was a simple, absent-minded push from my tongue, and out it came. After all night with it in, for an hour my teeth felt weird, like I had an unnecessary gap between both teeth. Thankfully, that, too, went away. Whatever idea is lodged in my mind has had plenty of time to ferment. Now it needs some absent-minded thinking to pop it free. So pen to journal and see where we go. Life must be cellular, self-sustaining, capable of evolving, and extract resources from its environment. Those criteria, from what I've read, are scientific consensus of qualifications of life. Again, I think about viruses, the main focal point of my argument with Jane. A virus isn't a cell, they are simply a DNA or RNA wrapped in a protein coat. They lack all other cellular components common to other life and bacteria. I can't help but feel that strikes as somewhat arbitrary. The genetic material is unique, and that is a very important element of life. Does a virus need ribosomes or organelles? Why is that a critical factor in determination? It still possesses unique hereditary information evolving into deadlier strains of disease. That genetic material propagates and mutates, so I feel technically a virus should pass that criteria as well. The literature states a virus cannot perform its own metabolic process. It relies on a host cell. Isn't that also true of a parasite? It is not like they live alone. They depend on hosts to feed off of, indeed even reproduce through. There are ghastly worms with disgustingly fascinating life cycles. The more I dwell, the less I can dismiss a virus simply because it relies on hosts for these functions. Just because something is distasteful should not exclude it from proper classification. Have we, red scientific community, struck out viruses because their alien form and nature repels us? It is not like we enjoy any type of benefit from them, right? We vaccinate and find ways to destroy them because they invade our bodies, our very cells, ripping them apart automatically with a robotic-esque determination, spreading diseases like wildfire. Wait, I feel like I'm on the edge. After stepping away and pondering for a minute, I think I've worked through that annoying kernel in my brain. When Jane and I spoke, I sensed a deeper insistence to her conviction, to her tone. She was pleading with me, but I did not know at the time. Jane could not care less about viruses, whether they are alive. But there is another thing that behaves eerily similar to a virus. Fire. At first, after making the connection that Jane worried over but could not voice, I scoffed. Fire's not alive. But then I admit, perhaps the conclusion is not so obvious, the claim against not quite overwhelming. Certainly someone with a warped state of mind. Fire shares many similar traits as a virus. They spread externally by consuming their host's fuel. They do not have an internal metabolism or cellular structure, but again, neither does a virus. More comforting, however, fire does not have genetic material to pass down. Sure, different fuel sources might burn uniquely, creating fires of different colors, but there is no evolutionary progression. Fire is fire. Since caveman times to now, its nature has not changed. That is good enough for me. If my assumption is correct, then Jane, for some inexplicable reason, maybe tied to schizophrenia, has personified or hallucinated fire as some kind of living organism. Maybe it's a symbol of representation of some malevolent figure in her delusions. I shall pursue this thread the next time we meet. I believe it is after my summer vacation. I need to make a note in my official notes so I don't forget to discuss this topic with Jane. Dragon flame. Roughly 1 million years ago in the land now called Ethiopia, a hominid species, through the use of fire, cleared the forests and their surrounding environment. This change in ecosystem invoked adaptations. More time was spent standing on 2 feet and less between branches in the canopy. Exposure to constant sunlight in the open plains meant the shedding of fur. Most fur-covered great apes and chimpanzees have their melanin in the fur. The pale skin of the Homo erectus meant the melanin needed to transfer from fur to skin, as the amount of sunlight allowed to enter is adjusted by the presence of melanin, necessary in the ever-growing savanna they had created. Sweating to cool their bodies is another new trait, along with self-hydrating the skin's melanin. But I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I? The old man shook his head, excusing himself for the breach of context. The point is, what you need to know now is all of these important markers of Homo erectus started roughly 1 million years ago. It is fair to say that these changes would facilitate the noticeable differences in the hominid line that would eventually become Homo heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, and finally into Homo sapiens. But there is far more to this story than mere evolutionary branches. First, there was the bottleneck of Homo erectus in East Africa, when the population of your ancestors would be classified as an endangered species by a biologist's standards. That is where the story of fire and humanity really begins. The old man stretched for a moment, worn bones cracking from the movement. But what initiated these changes? To move from forest to savanna, to lose fur and gather melanin, to walk rather than climb. A consistent use of fire from Homo erectus began to alter the ecosystem of East Africa. Small fires, barely a tool, more of a phenomena. Their homes were forests. Little good would come from burning it down. Then the earth changed. The Pleistocene epoch saw constant glaciations. Water levels were lower. The earth was on average 10 degrees cooler. Most of Africa remained warm and thriving, but the eastern side, where these past people mainly lived, experienced fluctuations of dry and wet periods. Allow me to continue to set the stage. Most of the earth, despite the Ice Age, was covered in old-growth forests, mighty trees that lumbered into the sky, huge trunks, deep roots. They grew slow but were hardy, hundreds, even thousands of years old to reach maturity. Keep this in mind. Trees are the vegetation climax, the apex plants of an ecosystem, the dominant plant species. We will return to this point shortly. The old man let his hands and memories warm in front of the fireplace a moment, recalling vividly some ancient memory only his eyes had seen. They seemed equally sad and proud. The Jaramillo reversal. 1 million years ago, the Earth's geomagnetic field reversed in what is known as an excursion event. It is a temporary switch, one that flips back after a short time. About 40,000 years in the case of the Jaramillo event. There is always debate about the geomagnetic reversals concerning what happens during them. Some say cataclysms, weather changes, extinctions, maybe not. One thing is certain, however. The reversal leads to a temporary weakness in Earth's magnetic field, the first barrier that protects the planet from the sun's solar winds. At the onset of a reversal, the field is significantly diminished. Ultraviolet rays dazzled the planet in the Jaramillo reversal, auroras unbound, like a bridge from the heavens to the earth, the glow of eternity in the night sky. The same time humans went nearly extinct, the same time melanin was needed to survive the open savanna, the same time human species started to wield fire as a force to alter the face of the earth. 1 million years ago, all of these events corresponded, one leading to the other. Homo erectus moves into the savanna. The Earth loses its electromagnetic shield. The solar radiation elicits changes in the skin, the gathering of melanin as an antenna to absorb the full spectrum of electromagnetism. And finally, the Promethean fire. This is it, the story of her as I saw it. Black Mold Sun by Fishing in Space. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Underneath the inferno of the sun is a dark star, an invisible inner counterpart. The sunspots are holes in the photosphere, areas where the black mold pokes through. All matter is light, fire that is forged into form. Combustion is a return to light. Everything physical is light that is trapped or transformed, transmuted. The black sun is an archaic motif. The imagery of a light that emits darkness fascinates and inspires, truly a poet's canticle. It is darkness which produces light, and light which produces darkness. This is the way it must be, as the interaction of the two unveils wisdom. Inside every sun is a core of darkness, a black sun. These are the results of black holes, misconceived as the death of a star. They are the birth of one. From the dark, light is generated. Stars are the phosphenes of darkness, the light wisdom of the wisdom matrix. Along the universe is a grid of dark matter, a sea of space tethered by stable filaments, a net. Should enough amass together, the wisdom grows unimaginably dense. So much pressure that light is emitted, gathers around it, swirls in a vortex, the birth of a sun. The conversion of hydrogen into luminous energy in radiating spheres. Along the matrix net of dark matter are the junction points of massive gatherings of dark matter, of wisdom and energy. They collapse on themselves until burning bright, they ignite a dark star made light. The glow and heat of a star. Crystalline deposits accumulate, electromagnetic storms toss into space, attracting particles that clump, calcify, grow. A planet forms, a wanderer that explores the revelations of its sun, and it is this dark matter that life architects itself with. The properties for life to emerge are still active. They didn't simply go away after life's first breath. Today, yesterday, tomorrow, life will emerge. Spontaneous generation. Not because life spawns from nothing, but because the circumstances for an organism to exist are still in effect. The complexity and diversity of nature, billions of combinations. Those blocks remain present. A new species based on its own criteria can evolve to fill a niche rather instantly in biological terms. Evolution is less a tree stemming from common roots, but saplings and seedlings. It depends on the gathering of dark matter and the light which combines in water to create. The recipe is written into the liquid database known as DNA. These seedlings may often follow familiar morphological forms, common anatomic abilities matching phylogenetic characteristics. Life spurs itself quickly, growing to the beat of the latest tunes, the recent changes in that daily sailing through space. From single cell to animal or plant, the new organism distributes itself in its niche. The parts in food and environment results in close enough genetic evolutions that it is almost imperceptible to tell if it were evolved over hundreds of millions of years. It is because there have been hundreds of millions of years that such spontaneity is possible. Complexity doesn't only drive diversity, it allows for emergent properties to cheat, to follow established and proven methods. But make no mistake, there will be many foreign and alien-looking creatures appearing once in a lifetime, once in an eternity, then disappear. As Earth swirls around space, pieces of dark matter and solar particles will always find new life forms to exist as. A living organism, on a small scale, is dark matter, the same as the sun. Each new dawn unveils the mysteries of the night. As solar systems wander through the sea of space, secret encounters, anomalous events, and bizarre sights may poke through. The atmosphere of a planet does not partition it from outer space. Outer space still enters, and it is full of the unknown. What is unknown becomes revealed by light. Light is the actualization of the potential wisdom of darkness. In the shade, empty places, forgotten rooms, and abandoned corners is outer space, and slipping through is the dark matter. In sunlight there is nourishment and growth. In darkness, under the black mold sun, there too is growth, the growth of decay. Abominations and unspeakable things flourish, holders of power and pure wisdom. Arranged like a net of nerves, the dark matter of the universe with its stars as nexus points mirrors that of the brain system, the web of life and food chain. Rather, because the dark matter is the source of energy and formation of the universe, it is life and nature and the brain which organizes through the properties of dark matter. The Earth, no, the whole solar system is never in the same place, the same space twice. It moves through that sea of cosmos along the dark matter net. Particles, radiation, information carried by light, all of it leads to newness. Not even the darkness is the same. Every dawn is different. The sun changes every day, goes through its own cycles. The dreams that planets dream, and their relationship to each other evolves as they revolve. Does light banish and reveal what is hidden in shadow, or does the shadow reveal the wisdom hidden in light? Living in the dark side of a black mold sun, whose light uncast is the darkness of outer space. When the blazing sun is gone, when she nothing shines upon, then you show your little light, twinkle, twinkle all the night. The Shade of the Fairies. Gunnar rolled over onto his side, groaning to the pain surging through his pores, punctured by the clack of Silverberg's spar hitting the deck. He stumbled onto the port of Boca de Cataro, hearing the distant roaring laughter of his crewmates. They were shoulder to shoulder with several dark men with similarly cracked lips, one with a knob for a hand gesturing wildly at him. Through missing teeth, he wagged his tongue quickly, making rounded sounds with a bounce that reminded him of the leaping waves they had left long behind. Suddenly, the man stopped and then repeated, "Prek," pointing up at the sun. He could tell from the glint in this wild man's eye that he was intending to make a joke, and he pressed his nub into a particularly red patch of skin. Yow, and the uproar was double from his crew. He grimaced and sent a hand out in front of himself, questioning what kind of crazy outland they'd found themselves in, what contagion his men had caught, probably precipitated by the influence of the overabundant sun. Before long, the nub man disappeared into a fisher's hut and emerged with a lar clay vase. He approached Gunnar, whose eyebrows shot up, his palms held out in front of him, wanting no further activity. The man reached into the vase, propping it up with the crook of his arm, and launched a white glob into Gunnar's chest, which seemed to contract. Looking down in shock, this man relaxed and began to rub it into his skin. All of the rest of the sun-touched men reached into the jar, seeking respite from the sun's wrath. As the sun sank into the sky, the Milky Way emerged to decorate the space above the mountains, trees, and the raging bonfire. They gathered branches thick as thighs, with the old man looking to the seafarers, ominously stirring a fist around the earth and sky before extending his fingers above his head. Drita and Agron took places amongst the men, sharing that this fisherman found his way to the village as a vestige of Alexander of Macedon's expedition. He married into the tribe, his wife the daughter of a matriarch responsible for a sheep yogurt that performed miracles. She cured men of typhus, children of malaria, even those with the cough. Though he is long gone, he carries on that name, Drita said. She was related to me from my father's side. We all came from further up the coast, wove in Agron, the fire illuminating his prominent brow. We carried over the name Ardii of our tribe from the mouth of the narrow river, where we would watch cranes bring from above and below the knowledge of translation. Their flight, the mass migrations, taught us the symbols that the waters of the mind recall. Tell them of the shape-shifting, Drita threw in. Of course, the king of the underworld could shape-shift into a crane, to which the three of them guarded the entrance. The black one of the Zana, known as Dodana, his wife, would emerge to bring spring, and was protected by the Kolshedra. He paused as his men glanced about, making a noise to ward off the tangles of anxiety. The Kolshedra was a beast who demands regular sacrifices to Dodana to preserve her beauty in spring. Though after decades of maleficence, the divine serpent transforms into a raging tempest, one that has no mercy upon the land or its creatures. And if she were to ever touch her tail to her mouth, she would end all life on earth. The foreigners sat shocked, one pitching in that they knew of the deity which he spoke. Jormungandr. Once he releases his tail, he sets off Ragnarok. You've misunderstood. Jormungandr's a gift to humanity, prevents chaos. You know not of what you speak of. The last rainbow-bodied Kolshedra danced and shook several castles into the sea. It unearthed a 17-meter python. He punctuated his thought with a cough that ripped through the air, glancing down to see glistening red. Agron wiped his hand on the foliage nearby and carried on, praying that the luck of being born in Kal hadn't run out yet. The armless man spoke with a lolling gravitas, staring intently into the flickering fire, the embers carried by the wind and into the sky. Just as Tomori and Rodoni, as the Kolshedra and the sons and daughters of the sun and moon, two hands of the same body, one right, one left, with the sole aim to provide safety for Dodona. And still they wrestle, confused about the ways of one another. Heroes and Legends. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, is a paradigm which must be abandoned. Its true role in the cell, however, is far more interesting. If we wanted to retain the essence of its title, we should say that mitochondria is the alchemy of the cell. It is the forge of the cell. Here in the cell, through the union of the archaea and bacteria, two families of gods, formed a cellular organelle that mimics the very nature of such a marriage, that of smelter, mixer, the alembic, the matron antimony, the she-wolf, passed down generationally by the feminine, the wild, wolfish beast of the metals. As the antimony, the mitochondria transmutes the conversion of all ores, devours all metals into refined material. The only exception is gold, which is dragon of the metals. Mitochondria is responsible for taking energy from the cell, what it receives from the transformation of light into water, into energy through dark matter's special photosynthetic redox property, conducts that energy and forges for the cell the building blocks, carbon chains, glycans, apoptosis, detoxification, cell growth, and any other need triggered by the light that enters its forge. DNA is a liquid crystal that contains a recipe, a receipt of possible instructions in how to perform them. It is a directory for the cell that can be scripted and enhanced and then carried from parent to offspring. A code, not to determine everything, but to transfer wisdom and experience, an instruction manual. Mitochondria is not the powerhouse, but it is the hearth, the fire pit where released energy is fed as kindling for the operation of every other process. The body's forging of its weapons, armor, scaffolding, tools, ornaments, motors, bridges. The electrical current of the mitochondria does indeed emit light in the form of biophotons, or bioluminescent ultra-weak light, which then resupports the photosynthesis of dark matter on the other end of the cell. The blaze of the fire pit shines brighter than the sun, for it is less than 30 nanometers from the dark matter of the body, and is unfiltered by distance, atmosphere, and shade. In the absence of all external light, the cell maintains its duties without end. Ceaselessly there is energy supplied to the mitochondria by the mitochondria's light. So long as there is biomass to form a cell, the balefire does not go out. Although at first glance this seems to suggest that mitochondria can hold on to its title as powerhouse, but the distinction is irreplaceable. It is absolutely essential to understand its role cannot be powerhouse. It transfers the energy, uses it, conducts it as forge, but itself is not a battery or bank, not a fuel depot. The utilization of its light emission to take advantage of the photosynthesis is incredibly clever and efficient, but should not be conflated as a powerhouse. The light is a byproduct that dark matter uses to split and reform water to generate a constant stream of high-energy electrons to the whole cell. The mitochondria may be the fire pit and forge, where fire can be placed and used, but it is the dark matter which supplies the fire, indeed, is the very fire. Functionally, it may sound as if nothing has changed, that this paradigm is the exact same. The old paradigm of the mitochondria is truly only several degrees off the center, a slight miscalibration at the beginning which has deviated far as the structures of the theory of life was built around such ideas. But it is not fully necessary to understand this in a detailed level, for the cell will carry its alchemy day and night without your permission for as long as you live. What you can understand about it, what can be done with this information is the story, and this story is one you are familiar with. You have known this your entire life, experienced it, seen it in the fairy tales and fantasy, religion and culture, heard about it from others, witnessed it everywhere, embedded into every language, brought out in every story you've ever encountered, real or fiction. All is based on this dark matter biology of the power of the light inside, the inner sun, the alchemy, and the coursing of dragons through the body. When you were born, your mitochondria relied on the parents. The currents of energy are entangled by other sources, whether biological parents or other caretakers, by society, by the rules and regulations that a child is raised to understand. Those entanglements mimic the energy web of regulation and conditioning, the web of dark matter. All the factors that contribute to a person, nature and nurture, parents, mentors, learned experience, friends, siblings, laws, education, music, clothes, words, attitudes, stories, the encoded instruction of DNA, the process of becoming a self, an ego, a person. This process ultimately concludes with the rite of passage, the hero's journey, the coming of age, the warrior's quest to become a legend. Those events which have been identified due to their distinct outcome, the severing of entanglements that influence the mitochondrial light, and in those moments of taking that leap, the mitochondria completes itself. Its circuit is fully formed, its own forge, not regulated by others, not chained to the will of someone else, tied down by insecurity and dysregulation. The cell can now run on its own light, orbiting its own star. That it was set ablaze and marks the finalization of the individuation, to become a fully realized person, not a puppet with strings holding it back, when the ability to regulate is no longer tethered to parents or to society, to expectations, to fears and doubts and anxieties, concepts, religion, pressure, belief, when nothing outside of yourself can tell you how to be or condition you. This can happen incrementally, though in its full potential should be one defining moment of life which is told in the stories as the end of the hero's journey or the warrior's quest. The success or failure is not always important, but it is when you reach inside and light that flame, when there is fire in the belly finally, when the soul is ignited, the eyes agleam with stars, the heart burns like the sun, the fighting spirit is born, standing on your own feet, producing your own light and energy. Those moments when the fog clears and energy rises, when those anxieties, insecurities, expectations, and doubts are savagely quelled, forgotten about, discarded. The safety nets that bind you down are shed. The whole world crashes, nobody else exists. The sky shatters and the ground trembles. Those archetypes in the stories, the coming of age and rite of passage and hero's journey and warrior's quest, all of them are about the start of life. the true beginning of a person. Those are the stories of how they did it, how they discovered purpose and confidence, how they wrestled free of the burdens meant to keep them down in the pit, how they became the legends that would train kids to inspire similar greatness. And it is true that there is comfort in the pit where others dwell and wish to keep you as company. Those people never saved themselves, caught by too many tethers, never able to complete the alchemical work of the mitochondria, defining the dark matter as their own for all time. The image of the passage of the tunnel into the light is more than metaphor. It is opening to the world, no longer afraid and hiding in the shadow. The limitations of those entanglements are draining, leaching. Everyone is feeding off each other because no one can produce their own light. The circuits are mutually, though usually not ever equally, parasitic, and sickness, abuse, and the cycles of trauma propagate and write themselves as recipes into the DNA, perpetuating and reproducing, eating. You know all of this. Expressions and sentiments such as "this is draining energy," of depression, what is haunting you, what is eating you, being leached and leeching off others, the feeling of being stuck by compulsive habits, generational trauma, caught in family cycles of abuse. Those are not metaphors, that is your energy, the light inside you that keeps you alive, and it is being snuffed out, stolen, the unformed mitochondria. Most people will live their lives not as themselves, never completing the alchemical work and starting their life. The warrior's quest reveals this process of leaving home or ideologies, patterns, stepping out of comfort and that mutual dysregulation, the frustration and draining of energy. Whatever the tether is, it pulls you apart until they are severed, those bonds that stop you from being powerful. As dark matter, the gravity tears you from yourself. The hero returns one day and renovates or vanquishes the problem of the hometown or origin. First is mastery of the self supplied by the light of the sun ignited in every cell of the body. The kind of light produced is a unique signature. The gift, talent, special ability, relic, magic artifact, whatever is given to the hero at the end of their journey, the start of their life, the discovery of their alchemy related to their identity that was meant for them. That is the forge, the alchemy of the mitochondria. The kind of light produced is a unique signature of yourself and your quest, what you are capable of, that potential, fully realized, which can initiate creation and destruction, the becoming a dragon, unleashing wolf of the metals, that matron antimony howling with rage and fury to make even the gods quake. Most people will never dare venture out to find their quest and complete it to begin their life. It is safe in the whole, where like-minded community supports one another's parasitism and inability. There is comfort in sharing in the light of each other's diseases and inequity, but it is terribly entropic. The snake devours itself unless it is uncoiled and riled from its hole. Everyone is waiting to be saved, but no one wants to go and light the fire and ride the dragon into glory. Act 3. Excerpts from the Journal of Dr. Hector Vasan. Undated. I am quite peeved with the contractors. They have ruined my plans for Independence Day. The back deck will not be done before then. I should have kept a closer eye on construction. It's all wrong, not according to the blueprints at all. Apparently, the main contractor, the owner, assigned the project to a first-time lead and he messed up big. The owner assures me he will personally see the project back on track, along with a discount on the final price for the mistake. I am disappointed I will not be able to host the holiday, but at least there is a solution and acknowledgement of mistakes. I'm sure Dad is rolling over in his grave. July 5th. I've just learned that Jane tried to set her room on fire last night. She got close enough to trigger the fire alarm. Apparently, she kept trying even as the sprinklers doused her smoking rag. She was in such an agitated state they had to sedate her. It took 3 orderlies to hold her down for the shot. The institution plans to medicate her through the weekend and monitor her state. Not only did I not predict this behavior, there was no indication throughout the day. The back courtyard has a nice view for 4th of July fireworks, so most of the residents enjoyed a late evening festivity. No one acted out during the show. I am eager for our next session. July 9th. Jane's physical state has turned back to like our first meeting. She was despondent and a mess. That haunted, exhausted look in her eyes is back. Clearly, she has not been sleeping well either. For the first half of our session, she would not engage. I asked her what prompted her latest episode. Did she experience a hallucination? What triggered such a sudden descent back into pyromania? No answers. At this point, I am a little frustrated, and I ask her if she enjoyed the fireworks. Fireworks are good, right? They're not all bad like viruses. She looked at me like I ran over her dog, such a quick, hurt expression flashing. Jane demanded to know what I meant by that question. I gestured to my notebook, recalling a past conversation about life and viruses, concluding with my logical reasoning that fire cannot pass genetic information down, thus it cannot be alive categorically. Jane scoffed at me, probably the first time she ever displayed an emotion beyond genially or anxiety. "It is alive," she said, barely a whisper, "but I have exceptional hearing." I ask her why she believes that. "It's true," she insists, her tone softening and the constant worry of anxiety dominating her words. She tells me what happened. Over the 4th, as she watched the fireworks from the institution's viewing area, she heard a voice in the fire, a different one in each exploding burst of color, a different voice, different from her arsons, but all saying the same thing, demanding to consume. The voices, angry and insistent, imploring Jane to burn whatever she can, to make the sky with such short-lived bursts roar to life, feeding on the building. Jane stops abruptly, tears filling her eyes. I think she had more to say, but nothing in my consolations prompt her to continue. Schizophrenia does not come and go like that, so I am very interested to uncover more. I can only speculate on the trigger of fireworks. This is such a unique case that it is hard to contain my excitement for the next session. I'm reorganizing notes and dotting my I's. I'm certain I will have to publish an article on this fascinating case. July 16th. Jane was medicated for today's session, but the medication administered shortly after our previous one when she began cutting herself. There's a disagreement between myself and the superintendent, who believes it was a suicide attempt. Although I agree Jane had a sharp negative trend in her mental health, I believe the cutting was a coping mechanism, not ideations. Of course, his responsibility over each patient's health is higher than mine, so he opted for the side of caution with good reason, I suppose. Regardless, the medication had the unintended side effect of opening Jane up to some real answers. Anxiety mellowed out from the prescription. She was able to discuss all the details she previously kept to herself. There's a lot to unpack. Jane's first time hearing the voice was during a tour at her old job to one of her company's fabrication plants. It was going well right until the tour stopped at a smelter being fed metal. Transfixed by the heat and swirling mass of liquid metal, Jane found herself staring deep into the molten slag's red-hot core. Despite the loudness of the factory, she heard a vile voice. The voice ranted at her, demanded Jane should throw herself into the smelting metal, that she was worthless, her job was worthless, potential parental disapproval. No one would miss her, that they would celebrate her being gone. She tried taking a step forward when she fainted. Her co-workers blamed it on the fumes and the heat. She never told them about the voice. She tried to forget the incident, tried to pretend it hadn't happened, that it was a daydream from lightheadedness. To me, Jane was adamant that the voice was not her own internal monologue. It was something outside, forcing into her mind. The next time she heard it, she was making dinner one night. She turned on her gas stove, then grabbed a pan. Before she placed it over the flame, the voice came back. Like before, she could not move, just stared at the flickering flame as it raved about her pathetic life, viciously begged her to shove her hand into the stove. I must admit I felt eerie listening to her cold voice, the medication robbing it of life. Jane sat motionless on the chair, knees drawn to her chest, her long sleeves mostly covering the bandages on her wrist. She stared off into a corner of the room, emotionlessly recounting its words, yet clearly those words had ruined her life. The voice said she was a mistake, that Jane knew this, and refusing to do anything about it was the most infuriating part. It wanted her to hurt, to feel the same pain the voice experienced, to share it with everyone if she was too weak to do it herself, to do what was right, spread the fire. I asked her to describe the voice to me. How did it sound? What was its pitch and tone? Jane had a hard time recalling it, like describing where you can vividly see the image, but the words fail to express the scene. Vaguely parental and authoritarian is the best summary, I believe, based on her awkward attempts to describe. It sounded masculine-coded. Maybe there's more to her relationship with her father. For the next couple weeks, she had heard the voice whenever she used the stove or lit a candle or anything involving fire, really. Sometimes she even had dreams about it. The voice's demands stayed on subject, haranguing Jane, constantly insisting she needed to burn everything down. She wouldn't be happy unless she did as told. Burn it all, then yourself. Of her words, those stood out the most to me. Even with the medication, I did not want to overexert and stress her mental state, so I ended the session there. To be honest, I felt a little out of sorts, like I heard a secret I wasn't supposed to. It was hard to focus on my other patients for the rest of the day. It is hard to gather my thoughts on the matter right now. I'm going to get some sleep now. The Shade of the Fairies. Drita wrapped her arms around herself, a pale liquid light coursing through her as she cast sideways glances at Nanita. Piro, tired from being carried, and the cinnabar red hair he was named for bobbled about the stone pathway. He stumbled, and Drita dropped to one knee, grabbing him, and immediately looked to Nanita as she released him. "He's got the spirit and dexterity of a newborn fowl," she laughed. Drita smiled, the corners of her eyes creasing. "He's got your dimples." "I'm just glad he didn't inherit Agron's eyelids," she said, helping to diffuse the potential compliment. A ward for the evil eye. The fragrant bay leaves summoned from the waters of the mind Piro's birth. I was told by my aunt that our births were blessed. The Zanat protected the area. Did they? My parents rushed there in the midst of a storm, a few days after they themselves climbed Mount Rodoni and reached two snakes lying across one another. As the sun's rays began to rake across the land, she saw her grandmother's hands gripping the back of her aunt. The oath stirred in her as she inhaled through Piro's scramble. She would serve him too, with sword drawn and palm open. The momentary moisture escaped through pursed lips, and she held her hand low to Piro, and his mother stepped in to say, "If you aren't more careful, the cave Lugati is going to get you." She traced her way about the stones, recalling the myth as her father had taught her. The wolf of Lac had puppies with a neighbor's dog, and the shepherd who raised it saw in him an aura that would bring good fortune. All of the villagers tried to tell him to kill it, wanting nothing to do with the wildness inside this half-breed. One day the shepherd wakes up from a deep slumber on the top of Mount Rodoni to see his wolf dog covered in blood and every sheep in his flock dead. He takes a dagger, slits the traitor's throat, and calls the village people to clear the remains. As they pulled the sheep away, they found 3 dead wolves. Nanita grabbed Piro closer to her. A massacre. For sport they do that. Piro squirmed in her grip, wanting once again to be freed. Drita solemnly agreed, then lamented. Better to be served a few at a time for meals and feasts and sacrifices. She reflected on her own contributions, wondering if she, like this half-wolf, was a Kulshidra. She had brought fortune and fame to her own tribe, to the loss of those around her, as they touched the sacred stones, feeling the aura that connected them to those before and beyond them. She prepared herself for another oath. This time, as she looked out to the jagged horizon, she promised not only to protect her own, but this nation's soul as his regent, and any others who aligned with the spirits of the RDI. Dragonflame. The old man stoked the fire, beckoned closer to it. Looking deep into the infrared glow, a scene began to take shape, flickered to life. A light long since gone, but now rebirthed like the legendary phoenix. As she walks onto the hill, bothered by crazy dreams, her life of poverty and unfulfilled memories flooding her, Her fantasies were of unfathomable things. She shivers, the sudden drop in temperature bringing her back to the present moment. It was starting, the day the dragon would swallow the sun. She brought with her a fur skin, pulls it around her shoulders now. All day the birds had been acting weird, calling out for hours and fluttering about before abruptly stopping. Even these hills were oddly silent. The whole world seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. But why should these dreams spring to mind? The most recent one involved her small gem of amber she found as a child wandering the woods. Grandfather told her it was a teardrop of the sun, that when the sun was bright and shining it would melt and fall into a tree, and the tree would drink the liquid sundrop, guarding it until the day it dies, when finally the piece of amber would be hidden in the forest floor. She dreamed of it humming, swirling magic traced in mesmerizing ripples extending from it. In the dream, a hand reached from nowhere, clutching it from across the nothingness, crushing it into dust. She holds it tightly in her hand. This was hers for the greater part of 20 summers. She doesn't want to lose it, her teardrop of the sun. She had wanted to be alone for the eclipse. Everyone else was going to cower, lamenting and praying, fearing the stories of the previous eclipse that had led to ruin for so many. But that was long before she was born. This could be the only one she will ever witness. Who could miss something so extraordinary as a dragon? So she was alone on the hill. The moon approaches the sun, shadows creeping over the land, an eerie stillness buzzing somehow louder than the birds chirping excitedly. She too holds her breath. The air chills further. She looks up, watching the moon and sun. How odd, she thought, there is no dragon. She realizes she can't avert her eyes as the sun becomes fully covered by the moon, save for a halo of flaming light. She sees herself gently swaying as she stares into the eclipse. Nothing has more beauty than this, she declares. She rocks to the tune of some vibrating inner force. This rushing noise fills her ears and the cacophony grows, growling now. A violet flame lights up in the eclipse. The hills start to wave. She can feel them rolling, like the land had turned into sea. Her body seemed absent from her mind, from her eyes staring into the eclipse. She watches the violet light engulf the sun and moon as the whole world seems to break down. She stares, unblinking. The sun and moon begin a waltz, this miracle of dance. They shoot around the sky, growing big, then small, close, then far. She thinks they will crash into earth and gasps. In the next instant, they fly away. Then the dreams all come back. She sees inside herself so much wonderful, painful light. At last, the dragon roars. She was struck down by the weight of it all, the blinding light, the terror of the sights she beheld. Half-conscious, thoughts of her life came galloping in between euphoric bolts of white lightning that struck the inside of her mind. We are suffocating. Starving, we scavenge for scraps. Sickly, we stagger our way through this world that rejects us. The trees are our enemies. Predators stalk our young and elderly. Moments of joy are fleeting and taken from us. Our past was broken, our present bleak, and dreams of the future are stolen. Surrounded by a fog of pain and suffering, cowering until the day we die, waiting fearfully for that day to arrive. We are afraid of new territory, drowning in the old territory. There is nowhere in the world for us. Our place is with the maggots and worms that crawl on our fallen. But I refuse that. I refuse everything. Her hand reaches up to a sun too far to touch. I want to reach. She whispers softly, all I've ever wanted was to see the horizon. And then, I am the dragon. The eclipse forged her soul into something new, tempered by a light so dim and yet so blinding. Though it felt like an eternity, the waltz came to a halt. The world she knew returned. The hills sat quietly as they ever had, but the land retained a smirk, a remnant of their jig lingering in the air. Now only a shattered violet stained her vision. It followed her every sight. She saw the true color of all things. In her eyes she had captured a gem of the eclipse, her own inner amber. Protect it with my life, says she to herself. The flame was placed in her, seared into her mind's eye. Nothing will ever extinguish you, she tells it. This will bring light to the world. She sees it all her dreams, all the world. She saw earth from the sun, and the sun from the earth, and the moon from the sun, and the sun from the moon, and the earth from the moon, and the moon from the earth. She arose on unsteady legs, shaking not from visions, but a surge of fervor, of furious energy, a rage that could match the sun. The air was static, lightning all around, though unseen. She could feel it, taste it. Glorious sun and her glorious fire, the whole of the world should taste this too. Her amber gem, still tight in her hand, looks now as it did in her dreams, the ripples emanating. Of course. She rubs it against her fur coat. She saw the lightning drag from the fur and into the amber. A spark zaps her finger, but the glint in her eyes is brighter. She gathers some dry leaves and twine, rubs the amber on the animal skin, and this time draws it nearer the kindling. The static spark lances out. Tongues of the dragon. The kindling smolders. She does this again, swiftly feeding into the small flame. She breathes life into the fire. It blazes, catching quickly, without prejudice, the entirety of the hill. There, that is the answer. That is the sun on earth. She jumps in delight, howls, a blood-curdling hunter's howl. The fire consumes. How wonderful this world is. Intoxicated by fire and sun, she only wishes to bring the earth to the same shade of flame in her eyes. That is the soul of her life. No more dying, no more cowering. She continues to light fires all along the hillside. Eventually the others come to investigate. Fire is taboo in the dry season. They are angry. She can feel it long before they interrogate her. Their homeland is ablaze. She says to them only the sun is home. She tells them of the dragon that swallowed whole a dancing moon and sun. Fearful, they exchange glances amongst themselves. These omens are troubling, they say. You've doomed us, they chorus. We are dwindling, hunger, disease, fighting. We are few and you have doomed us. They fail to convince even themselves. They are already under her spell. They can feel it too, the wings of the dragon beating all around them. They see her, a face and a look by all reckoning mad, but one that is undeniably comforting in its intensity. A purpose, a will to live, a will to conquer, a reason to dream again. They see it too now, that she is a dragon, one to match rivers and mountains, no, greater still. They bow before their new queen. She rules now. What of us? What is your command? There are corners of the world, profane places where the light does not reveal, where fire is unknown. The earth is frozen and so the sun cannot embrace. We will be bringers of the sun. Set forth from here, venture into the farthest reaches. Bring with you a piece of this flame, carry it with you always. Never let it die. Burn the world in dragon flame. Intermission. 100 souls. 100 photos have been taken with a camera covered by a pinhole. This effect changes how the light enters the lens as it concentrates the light into a needle-size opening. The rest of the lens is blacked out, preventing focus and limiting exposure. The pinhole is an archaic optical method used in the oldest of shamanic ceremonies, distorting how the world is seen during trances, altering the very visual perception of the reality, revealing new and hidden things in Toptic Phosphine's novel Perspective, Angles, and Angels. A photograph works by capturing light, a snapshot of one brief flash of revelation. There are photos of the sun and moon, of light reflecting off shiny surfaces, metals, mirrors, minerals, the sparkling of water and icicles, power lines and dust kicked up, stones and buildings, through trees and leaves, behind the clouds and crystals, light from the sun, from lamps and fires, gleaming and shimmering rainbows of incandescence, scintillations of particles, bouncing rays, iridescent and fluorescing lights. Orbs illuminating and phosphorescing, beaming radiations and bursts in every spectrum, seen and unseen. infrared and ultraviolet, X-ray and the gamma ray, micro and radio waves, dark matter, and dragons. "Do you know," started the old man, "how ignorant you have to be to understand each and every light? The sun defies all expectations. There is no end to its inner truth. There are mysteries only you will uncover, you and the sun in unison. Abandon all notions of light. It will never make sense. Write your own mythology of the sun. Burn it into your nervous system. Light your own candles. The sun today is different from yesterday and will be different again tomorrow, like phases of the moon. Ponder the day, seek out the experience of light in every corner. There are things in dreams fantastic beyond comprehension. You exist between light and shadow. You are the material matrix that marries the two. Moments of fantasia. In dreams, when everything starts to waltz in surreal vision, the miracle of the sun when it dances in the sky, such as what occurred one day in Fatima, and countless other days across time. Unique, never before seen, never again to be witnessed. Cosmic events. Shooting stars, the unveiling of the night sky and the Milky Way laying in a body of dark matter, and you, somewhere, standing amidst it all. GYA by Rex Moniger. The barren rock drifted lifelessly around the young sun, freshly entangled in an orbit that would remain for time scales beyond eons. This region of space was young, and the solar children only newly formed after ages of gradual accretion. The violent cataclysm of the initial epochs seemed to peacefully settle in a state of equilibrium, yet there is a fundamental danger present to all new things. In the darkness, another heavenly body feels the jarring pull of its larger, distant cousins. The brief, stable orbit it too enjoyed accelerated, shaking the pillars of its foundations. Trembling and powerless, the planet is ensnared in the drag of its larger sister. The consequence is a planet-shattering collision, soundless in the void, where the two spheres crumble into each other, merging permanently. Fragments of the larger sister, molten metal and rock, are expelled, but they lack the ability to return and do not have the momentum to escape. The abandoned fracture is doomed to watch over the planet as a chained satellite. On the planet, molten sheets rippled across the surface like waves of water. Tremendous forces battered the reformed planet. Its proto-atmosphere was sheared away in the collision, leaving it exposed to the vibrant energy from the system's sun. Clouds of silicon and carbon are exposed to flares rippling through space. The electromagnetic radiation bathed those clouds freely in the light of creation. As the immediate aftermath of the impact ebbed, the planet settled. The atmosphere returned and allowed condensation to create liquid oceans. The clouds of silicon and carbon fell through the early oceans into the hardening surface, integrating into the rock cycle, where the rich minerals rotate through the rotation sections of the planet's inner body. Under the ocean and below the lithosphere and the swirling plasma of the early asthenosphere, the Silacea were born. They formed from the cosmic radiated silicon and carbon mixed with hydrogen, being pressed into unique chemical compositions from the immense pressures hundreds of kilometers under the planet's crust. A new first thing from a young planet born in its earliest days. The Silacea did not live like conventional organic life, made of cells and hereditary information passed down. Like viruses and other dismissed inanimates, they thrived in the uncomfortable gray areas of forced taxonomical classification. No, the Silacea were chemical structures immortal from age, communicating in frequencies outside comprehension. Individually, the mineral life were smaller than cells of eukaryotic life. For millenniums, the Silacea lived on the whims of their surroundings, silent and still, until they discovered pockets of food. They converted or farmed the sister mineral known as Wadsleyite. This orthorhombic crystal held most of the exigent ingredients for Silacea life, full of silicon and oxygen, bonded to critical hydrogen atoms. Slowly, their numbers grew. Over aeons, the Silacea civilization flourished, fueled by the Wadsleyite. Their greater numbers created advanced thoughts. They spread further throughout the interior of the planet, transforming surroundings for their benefit. They manipulated their rocky world, breaking down misshapen formations into pockets of space where they could crystallize forms with purpose. They formed crystalline structures of astonishing patterns. These configurations unlocked the greatest potential of the Silasy. Their marvels were of unparalleled complexity. As the asthenosphere flowed under the crust, the Silasy flowed throughout these awesome crystalline structures. The fuel for these expansions was the hydrogen dioxide in the Wadsleite, the critical key to Silasy life. At the apex of their progress, a troubling realization occurred. While silicon and carbon were plentiful, hydrogen dioxide was not. The true trouble lay with the Wadsleite. Their impetus for growth was a rare material, hard to find and practically the only source of dihydrogen monoxide in the entire region. The Wadsleite was not only hard to find, but did not replenish. The future of their amazing crystalline constructions depended on acquiring more and more of the material. It became clear that they lived in a Goldilocks zone. Deeper into the planet's body, the asthenosphere lost all solidity, becoming a pure molten ooze. That deep, they had no chance of surviving, their delicate forms unable to stand such excessive heat and pressure. However, further up where the temperature cooled, the rock was firm. Or, as one group of Silasy proposed, perhaps beyond the cold confines of solid mantle lay another perfect environment for Wadsleite. The debate raged on expectations of what to expect further above, but truthfully, the decision was never in doubt. The Silasy refused to accept the limits of their present circumstances. They had dreams for greater achievements. They decided to build a grand tower piercing the thick mantle above, a pylon that could host the Silasy as both a vehicle of transport and a home. Burrowing further above was a torturous process, finding seams of cracking open fissures to rise up through, millenniums in the making. Gradually, with the patience of immortals, the Silasy rose with their tower, riding the structure past the highest limits of previous thought. Eventually, they found evidence of dihydrogen monoxide in increasingly high quantities. With the rich silicon deposits, the Silasy uncovered unbelievable growth. This growth flowed back into expanding the tower. If this much dihydrogen monoxide existed here, then how much existed further above? A minority of Silasy protested, still argued against the obsession, advocating reusing the tremendous materials for smaller, more intricate designs. They advocated to stop progress on the tower, spend more time studying this unusual form of dihydrogen monoxide, not trapped in an orthorhombic body that they found in the minute gaps in the rocky mantle. The greater the tower became, the fewer listened to that opinion. The grandeur of their mightiest achievement represented how the Silasy viewed themselves and their world. So the tower rose, and rose to pierce the mantle of their universe. The Silasy found more dihydrogen monoxide than they ever could have imagined in their immortal dreams. Hundreds of millions of gallons of ocean water broke through the tenuous final cracks in the crust and the lithosphere. The unimaginable amounts of water crushed the tower's majestic spirals and arches and shattered the fragile forms of the Silasy. In mere moments, their civilization was destroyed, a cosmic mockery of the absurd generations of time to reach that point. Once the waters reached deep into the asthenosphere, a new equilibrium arrived. The water settled, and the crushing weight stabilized. Pieces of the Silasy continued to rise, beyond the crust into the watery world of the deepest parts of the ocean, where a primordial soup waited its final ingredient. Life would take on a new form, free of crystalline bodies, into something far more adaptable. However, perhaps not free of their legacy. The Silasy spoke in harmonic frequencies beyond life's understanding. Echoes of their drive to eternally create, to dream grander forever, lingers in the chemical makeup of its distant descendants. A primordial desire to break free past the ceiling of current achievement and environment. Consequences be damned. Intermission end. Act 4. Dragon Flame. The old man took a sip of his whiskey, letting the drink saturate in his mouth. He stood up and paced around, needing a moment to recover from the trance of the story. Staring back into the fire, he resumed. With melanin and sweat, humans could live under the hot sun in open plains. With fire, man could go anywhere. At that time, when humans were at their closest to annihilation during the Jaramillo excursion, most of the remaining species in East Africa traveled in each direction, migrating with a purpose to set fire to the world. The activity is one of zealous fanatics. The earth warmed suddenly. Carbon levels spiked up from entire swaths of the earth on fire. Human and their fire reached nearly every continent at this time. The earth entered an interglacial period. All the wars of the world over the last 200 years with firebombs and napalm and nuclear weapons and mass deforestation is but a candle compared to what a few thousand humans did 1 million years ago. Fires burned for hundreds of years at a time. The verdant old-growth forest that dominated every ecosystem was brought to ashes. How else did you think the old forests disappeared? This is the legacy of your ancient ancestors, those past people that changed the world. Branded into the deepest core of the nervous system was one individual's will of the sun, one that can be awakened and would be awakened over the course of the last 1,000,000 years. A temple of the dragon, encoded into every descendant of that cult of fire, the so-called human race. The mastery of fire, you may hear that a lot, but allow me to tell you what that truly looked like, for it is easy to toss aside. Humans are so swift to forget where they come from. While lightning fires are the most reasonable potential cause of fires, the fact remains that only minute deposits of wood ash and pre-Pleistocene deposits have ever been found. Fire from non-man-made sources is an exception, a rarity. Fire is a sign of human activity. So how was it used? The fire drill is the most referenced fire starter used all over the world. Friction through rubbing sticks. But there are many more ways than that. Amber, for example, has triboelectric properties and a somewhat high electron affinity. Animal furs have very low electron affinity. Rubbing amber against fur would pull electrons from the fur and provide the amber with a negative charge. This would cause it to attract small debris, dust, twigs, leaves, hair, if held in proximity to them. More pertinent is that static electricity can start a fire if in the presence of flammable material. Amber would have been much more common in the old-growth forests that the world was covered in several million years ago. Its use as a fire starter should not be discounted. Your word for electricity comes from the old word for amber, electron. There is also the possibility of quartz through piezoelectric reaction. Glass made by coastal lightning could also be a potential fire starter by focusing light rays. Still, an active volcano could be used to light roots and then taken. Though any and all of these methods and more are possible ways to make a fire, they are extremely rare outside of intentional intervention. Whatever the means, since time immemorial, fires have been set to dominate, control, expel, clear, access, and disintegrate their environments. The longest and oldest of human activity on Earth is the fire economy. Excerpt from the Journal of Dr. Hector Vasan, July 19th. Did I go down a rabbit hole or what? Jane's perception of hearing a father figure's voice in the fire reminded me of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, where the main character comes to regret his creation, the monster. I never understood the pedantic rebuttal to naming the created monster as Frankenstein 2. It accepts Victor as its creator or father, so readers designating him with the same patronym is logical. I also think it ties nicely with broader story themes of parenthood and identity, and tries to destroy it. Doesn't the monster die by fire, regretting all its mistakes? This line of thought and reading led to other thoughts and etc. until I discovered a fascinating belief I had not heard of before. It is a Gnostic concept about the nature of the universe. In their mythology, they called the creator the demiurge. There are conflicting interpretations of this being, but the one that stuck out the most to me was the malevolent creator myth. This version of the demiurge is evil and the source of all evil. These Gnostics believed the material world was evil since the demiurge made it. A lot of the cruelties and hardships in the world nest snugly with a metaphysical interpretation of an evil creator whose essence, in fact, corrupts existence intrinsically. I imagine the antiquity and later medieval realities for the people of that time would lend extra credence to a corrupted world. The evidence of a cruel god in many respects would be staggering. They would lack understanding of biology, unable to comprehend the source of plagues or global climate change leading to famines. It must have seemed like whims of a cruel god. Following this thought and connecting it with my earlier note of the masculine-coded nature of the voice haunting Jane, I wonder why beings such as this are often considered male. Even if the demiurge was considered non-binary, which I personally am not sure, it originally stemmed from the Hebrew tradition whose god Elohim was masculine. He was a father-creator in the mythology. But why? Why has so many cultures viewed destructive creator deities as male? Even off the top of my head, I can think of plenty of examples of this tendency, not just in mythology but also in literature. Norse mythology provides a clear example. The world is created from the corpse of the giant Ymir. The world is destroyed in fire by Surtur, another giant. I do not believe the creator and the destroyer of the world being nominally separate entities affects my connection of the broader theme. The giants come to destroy that which was made from themselves. The very world everyone resides on, Ymir's corpse, allows their hated enemies, man and gods, to thrive, so it must be destroyed. The demiurge and Norse giants parallel Oedipus quite nicely, I feel. In all narratives, they are the creators, although Oedipus is more so in regards to his family and being the steward of a kingdom. However, he comes to regret everything he's created, leading him to exile and blind himself in a savage act of self-denial, similar to a malevolent deity regretting its very act of creation. I argue the sin of creation, i.e. Oedipus's incestuous children resulting from the union with his mother, is on par with the demiurge's belief in the flawed nature of the world. In both, the very ingredients or formation was inherently flawed. I must tie back to Frankenstein too, and his realization of the inherent evil in his child. Thus, none of these creators sought to destroy their offspring for mustache-twirling evil, but because their fundamental creation was evil. In all these stories, the destroyer is masculine. Something in these cultures recognize a basic underlying premise that man might create life, but often he destroys it too. Look at the primary instigator for practically every war and conflict. Man, male man, is the one thrusting out his fist to smash a piece of creation. Perhaps Jane is channeling deep trauma or resentment of male figures into a psychosis that prompts her to engage in fire-starting pyromania. It is a fascinating concept that I will look more into. Speaking of mistakes, the contractors for the deck. His promises to fix the project have turned out to be half true if I'm being charitable. It looks all wrong, especially the staining. The colors are off, it clashes with the house's paint. Just hideous. The owner insists this is what we agreed upon, which, of course, is a lie. I'm insisting he restains the deck to the proper color and replace the light fixtures. They should be a soft, warm glow like from a campfire, not this unnatural, bright white fluorescence. I should have gone with the other contractor, probably would have been able to host the summer holiday party. July 25th. I caved. I paid the contractor to switch the light fixtures and to restain the deck. Maybe I should have taken this to civil claims court, but honestly, who has time for that? I want this fixed before the summer is over, so I caved. At least I can move on now. Deck's final total, including discount for botching the job in the first place, comes out to just about the same as the original quote. Wait, did that asshole mess up the lights on purpose to recoup the discount? August 6th. I have been jittery since the session with Jane today, a sort of nervous energy. Decided to write down what happened to help process the feelings. I decided to do something a little untraditional with Jane, since our last few sessions, while good, have not really gotten to the heart of the matter, like I wanted. Her medication opens her up, but it is hard to get a proper feel for her emotions. Everything is at a distance because of it. I wanted her to access those emotions, really hear the voice with me present so I could decipher the origins behind it and help her get her life back. I felt confident that her fire-setting ideations were just a stress-relieving habit, one that could be resolved by identifying their source. My attempts to uncover something with her father proved fruitless. I truly could not find even a thread to pull. Their relationship appeared completely healthy. which doesn't make sense, for my judgment is rarely wrong. I know I'm onto something. So I may have been too hasty for another breakthrough in understanding her. I placed a candle on the table, unscented, didn't want potential distractions, and told Jane to stare in the flame. I wanted to know what she felt or heard. To my future self, I advise against listening to the recording. I shall summarize, but hearing her words left the kind of dread in me that I do not think should be revisited. It took a minute of her looking rather distantly at the flame before she suddenly straightened. I went hiking once when I saw a deer drinking at a creek. It had not noticed me until I tried to get closer. Suddenly its head snapped up, alert and scared. Jane's sudden posture change resembled that primal reaction. I asked, and she told me she heard the voice. I told her to repeat everything it said. When she started, I admit goosebumps came all over my body. Her passionless voice, pharmaceutically dulled, spilled such awful things. The voice berated her at first for not being able to accomplish anything. How could she be so useless? To be a good girl, she needed to burn everything down. I asked her why did the voice want fire. In that flat, medicated tone, she explained it did not have to be fire. The voice only cared about crushing the world into dust. Whatever worked was fine, but fire is easy. Fire is effective. Fire sears, scours, and cleans. At some point I stopped looking at Jane or my notebook. I started looking into the candlelight too. Looking back I feel crazy. But for a bit I could almost hear a different voice. Words flicking like the small flame just behind Jane's words. A really hateful, hurtful voice. The voice hated people, hated buildings, cities, culture, society, and everything underneath. It hated happiness, sadness, crime, sin, the whole gamut of human existence. Our pettiness and hypocrisy was as vile as altruism and love. We revolted the voice, caused it unbearable anguish just living in this disgusting planet. Let fire eat the world. Not just the world. Everything was a mistake since the first pop of existence. That the universe needed to be ripped apart or blasted into atoms. The voice hated the universe almost as much as it hated Jane and me. We knew better, knew our lives were rotten. The only meager pleasure the voice found was watching human lives burn away. Couldn't I do my part and burn it all, then myself? My phone rang and I came back to my senses, realized I had let the session get out of control. Even through the medication, Jane had tears running down her face, her voice thick with emotion. I blew out the candle and she abruptly stopped. She didn't say anything after that, just hugged herself. I'm glad my phone rang. I usually remember to mute it during sessions. I don't know what to think about Jane or even my behavior. I have never had a similar feeling before, like I was sharing in a delusion with a patient. Only at the time it did not feel like a delusion. I could hear the boiling rage in the little flame, the exasperation, no, the outrage and gall at my fundamental existence. Like, how dare I exist? I looked it up to make sure I got the words right, but the experience makes me think of Maya Angelou. Bitterness is like cancer. It eats upon the host, but anger is like fire. It burns it all clean. I think I'll watch a comedy before bed tonight. The Shade of the Fairies. Out of breath, the young messenger reported, "Scared ladies' troops are making their way here. Epirus and Acarnania wouldn't stand a chance," she replied. "Excellent," and the messenger continued. "But I came to report that a blood feud in Skodra broke out. At the rate they're going, not much will be left by this next moon." Drita groaned. "So help me, Medeiros. It was Bardhiel?" "Yes, Teuta. He severed the head of the boy who had been spending time with his arranged wife. This boy happened to be the son of Dio, just back from a raid." She thought carefully as she approached Phoenicia. She made promises to the Gallic mercenaries defending the city that she would split the bounty if they joined her in a demonstration of force against the oligarchs. Without much incentive to remain loyal to Phoenicia, they joined her bands. She then promised the rulers she would fortify the region by restricting plundering, under the sole condition that they offered slaves, gold, and their allegiance to symbolize their agreement. Left without much of a choice after their army defected, they accepted. They even sent back the Aetolian and Achaean troops who had come to lend aid, as under this treaty they were considered enemies. "I was hoping for a battle," Scaredly 80s said gruffly. Drita smiled and said, "I can only offer you the constant need to fend for your territory." This territory had been won differently than Medion under Agron. He had been motivated by Demetrius of Macedonia, who paid him heavily just before his death. She wondered about his riches in the afterlife. Surprise echoed in the voices of those who spoke of these events, even as Drita proceeded through a siege of Issa, where she met with brothers Gaius and Lucius Corncanius. These men inquired about her potential allegiance to Rome, questioning the piratical tirades. She told them she primarily served the interests of her people, and that Rome mostly offered to deconstruct sites they considered sacred in favor of their assemblies. Drita offered as well that she was sorry for what happened under Agron's reign, but not what happened under hers. That though she wasn't opposed to use of force, the tragedy of piracy didn't interest her. With that, Gaius and Lucius took off, their ship captured off the coast of Issa during the siege, and Lucius was killed under the mistaken suspicion of threat. The spring of the following year, Drita had her sights set on unification all the way to the Ionian Sea, besieging Epidamnus and occupying Carcera and Apollonia. They appealed to the Achaean Aetolian aid, even as their fleet of Paxos had been crushed, and that stirred the interests of Rome, seeing as the work had been done for them, and that security of trade throughout the coast, though managing individual rulers was clearly impossible considering Drita's position. They fought her military and acquired her lands, ensuring to restrict armed vessels from sailing south of Lissus, and relieving her of the weight of the gold she was carrying. She sent ambassadors to Rome to surrender the prisoners and deserters into their hands. They received for answer that Carcera, Ferus, Issa, Epidamnus, and the Illyrian Autontani were already Roman subjects, and a question if Pyrrho might have the remainder of Agron's kingdom. Drita's vision seemed to go up in smoke with the fires of the day of summer celebrations, and a new one took its place. She could see beyond the flame, Demetrius of Pharos taking the claim of Carcera, and Nanita betraying both Rome and his own, but without consequence. Demetrius forming alliances with the young king of Macedonia, and half-heartedly taking up battle for Rome against the Aetolians even with incentive, sending out troops beyond Lissus, along with Scaredly 80s, and the eventual demonstration of will by the Romans, without allegiance and the ceaseless engagement of sacrifice to those lands in the form of a second war. Act 5, Dragon Flame. Fire economies are simple, and includes all the ways fire was used intentionally to benefit humans. Burning vegetation clears a space to safely travel thickets where potential hidden enemies lay in wait. Driving, trapping, exhausting game from small animals to the larger cattle and elephants for hunting is one of the most frequently described tactics. Access to fruits, nuts, and other small food sources after a wildfire is set. The palatability of previously inedible foods through cooking. More recently in human activity is the use in agriculture to clear land, refresh it, and allow for new planting. Broadcast burnings were the norm for nearly 1 million years. A torch was set to a dense region of vegetation simply to clear it. Fires could burn for years on end. Indeed, through singed roots and horns, humans also transported and passed down fire starter for thousands of years. No hunting and nomadic culture ever put out old campfires. Where they moved on from, it was important to retain a ready fire in the event of their need to return or to help navigate should they get lost. Everywhere humans traveled, even for the simplest hunting trip, a campfire was made. That is the way humans became successful and spread to every continent. One of the earliest records of exploration about Africa, the Periplus of Hanno, describes it. By day we saw nothing but woods, but by night we saw many fires burning. Going along 4 days, we saw by night the land full of flame, and in the midst was a lofty fire, greater than the rest, and seemed to touch the stars. That is the way humans operated. If there is a fire, there is human activity. The practices of hunter peoples still in existence is unchanged from techniques and methods employed since the advent of fire. This changed the world, every part of it. Indeed, the changes enacted by the flame is where the strongest evidence lies. The ecological and biological adaptations of the rest of the world is a greater sign of human activity than archaeological remains of humans, which are sporadic and unreliable in understanding the narrative of human activity, especially in context of fire. The pressure exerted by consistent fire use is the best archaeological evidence of ancient human activity. The first is the existence of grasslands. Grasslands do not meet the requirements of what is known as climactic vegetation. The roots of grass do not reach deep into the soil, meaning the depletion of nutrients does not sustain grass as a stable climax. Trees evolved to specifically live long and forage deep into the ground to always have a supply of fresh soil. The only way a grassland can exist for a long period of time is through consistent burnings, which restores the enrichment of the soil and prevents grass from suffocating themselves. Without fires, grasslands would eventually lose to trees, and a forest would repopulate where any grassland exists. This includes savannas, prairies, steppes, meadows, pampas, and so on. Climactic vegetation can be thought of as the apex equivalent for plants. Trees are the dominant life forms in the world of plants, and only through specific intervention will they be suppressed. Grasslands are intermediary ecosystems if left alone. With such ecological pressure applied by humans using fire relentlessly, the formation of deserts is a direct result of grasslands being torched. Forests are burned down, making way for the fast-growing grass to take their place. If left alone, the trees will reclaim the land. Grasslands can be sustained artificially if they are burned with the appropriate timing, something nomadic cultures learn to do effectively. Without fire, grasslands can go in one of two directions. Either they are reduced to desolate wastelands or become forests. Much depends on whether water remains in flow and humidity levels are sufficient to rehydrate the land. Deserts, like grasslands, are symptomatic of prolonged human activity. The deserts of the world mark some of the oldest locations of human occupation. Grasslands more recent, and old-growth forests largely untouched, of which there are almost none. Studying trees provides further insights. Trees exposed to consistent burning learned to adapt. There are two general types, pyrophytes and pyrophiles. Pyrophytes are further categorized into two, active and passive. Passive pyrophytes simply have developed fire resistance. Active pyrophytes have that fire resistance and produce flammable resin and oils to accelerate a fire in order to destroy competition. Pyrophiles are trees which are purposefully more flammable as part of their reproductive strategy. The seeds of pyrophiles are encased in a shell that only opens when exposed to high amounts of fire. Some trees are both pyrophiles and pyrophytes. Some examples include varieties of pine, redwoods, sequoias, some oaks, and the Venus flytrap. There are also insects such as the fire beetle, which uses infrared to detect fires, as they will mate and lay their eggs in burned wood, as living trees would drown them in their sap if they were to attempt to burrow. The existence of fire adaptations indicate a need, and that need didn't exist in pre-Pleistocene ecosystems. Only with the presence of fire-wielding humans did trees become exposed enough and consistently to adapt to fire. Many of these species came to rely on fires so much that they are threatened with extinction without it. So reliable were the flames that mankind wrought upon the world. In the tradition of lighting a tree for the winter solstice, fire was originally used. This harkens back to 1,000,000 years of ritual burnings to celebrate. Indeed, fires are the core of every religion, festival, ceremony, ritual, and celebration among humans. Tracking the migration of past people is possible through the changes in the land, understanding the most important fact, that fire is extremely rare outside of volcanoes, lightning, and seams of coal dust. That is not to say they never occurred or were never a source of ecological pressure, but the scale of fire they can cause is limited to specific regions, and the timing is not consistent enough to elicit adaptations, but humans spread to many areas outside of these zones. It must also be stressed that fire is not an easy process to start randomly. It takes careful and skilled application of the right material with the right airflow for even the driest twigs to catch. Many have perished in failed attempts to light their campfires. Most of life is made up of water. There is a similar misconception that a person or an animal can be easily set ablaze. Suffocation will happen long before one combusts into flame. All that being said, however, once a fire is burning bright and hot, it will rage and consume indiscriminately. The presence of such ecological changes in the Americas suggests the presence of fire-wielding humans for at least the previous 300,000 years during the third interglacial period, contrary to the 1200-year theory that persists despite overwhelming ecological evidence. Fire economies caused many more changes. Most slow-growth trees had to adapt or die. Trees learned to grow skinnier and faster as a way to prepare for the inevitable fire. The forests of the world today are the result of those fire economies. You see, at the fingertips of mankind, the eruption of fire the world over changed the surface of every continent. The earth would dip in and out of glacial periods. Humans created wildfires, pillaged the resources, now free from predator and bramble. They moved and allowed for new growth. They spread and grew in numbers. Considered to be the next stage in human evolution occurred some 700,000 years ago, right at the time of another geomagnetic reversal. This one, mind you, wasn't an excursion like the Jaramillo. This was a full reversal, and similarly, humans faced another bottleneck of populations, though by now people had begun to live all over Eurasia. The weakened magnetic field allowed radiation and dark matter in at much higher doses. The world changed and adapted, as it always will. With more plains came larger herds of animals grazing in the newfound meadows. Ultimately, it was the spread of fire that would later lead mankind to plant seeds and begin to start agriculture. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Around 40,000 years ago, what is considered to be the mark of your most current ancestors, Homo sapiens, experienced yet another reversal of the geomagnetic field, though more similar to the Jaramillo in that it was a temporary excursion. The Lachamp excursion saw an explosion of cave art, new hunting tools, and the disappearance of Neanderthals and many large mammals. The weakened magnetic field saw solar flares of such intensity that humans would have little choice but to live in caves, and there gaze into the fire at night, sparking the imagination and searching inward for the deep messages in the nervous system. A lot to take in, I'm sure. Allow me to summarize the timeline of the last 365,250,000 days of human history. 1 million years ago, humans began using fire to shape their environment. This occurred around the time of a brief pole reversal, the Jaramillo excursion. It marked a change in hominid biology, that of the loss of fur, more upright movement, and the accumulation of melanin in order to survive in the open plains that resulted from the tool use of fire, hallmarks of Homo erectus. Populations largely stayed in Africa, though as far back as 2 million years ago there were human groups traversing outside. The next significant change occurred around the following much larger pole reversal, the Brunhes-Matayama reversal. The most recent full geomagnetic flip around 760,000 years ago. Fire use increased still. Forests occupied by humans were replaced by grasslands. Humans continued adapting to the newer environments, reaching to nearly every corner of the earth and changed the ecology of trees from slow, towering growths to faster and thinner pyrophiles adapted to consistent burnings, some even relying on the fire. The Lachamp events marked yet another brief excursion around 40,000 years ago, and marking the most recent ancestry of anatomically modern Homo sapiens. Fire use cleared almost all ancient forests around the earth. Where there is deserts, there is ancient fire-using humans. Where there is grasslands, more recent human fire use. The land does not lie. Pastoral and then agricultural humans arose from the large open lands that allowed for grass and crops to grow and large, migratory animals to form herds. The closest ecology to a desert is a farm. The reason farms lead to desertification is the lack of grasslands to protect and provide a stepping stone for trees to reclaim the land as climax vegetation. What are used as crops are rarely ever a climactic plant. They rely and are co-host to complex ecological diversity. A single type of crop will spell doom for a land in the long run. There is nothing to balance the depletion of the soil and drying of the water. At that point, fire is the best possible method to save farmland and dying grassland. From there, a forest can reclaim. The predecessor of farms are plains and grasslands. Grasslands are an intermediary vegetation to the climax vegetation of trees. Trees that were burned down to expand the view. Humans are a species that needs large open spaces, caught in walls, suffocating in liminality, bound by chains. Fire is your birthright. Never forget that. It's written inside you, branded by the dragon flame of the first queen of fire, illuminated only by the sun. The old man's old heart strained as he stood up, grunting with the effort, his gaze connected to the fire. But you haven't asked the big questions yet. Do you want to know the big questions? What is fire? What is the sun? What are dragons? Where does life come from? What is light? What is darkness and dark matter? Those are the big questions.
Black mold sun. Then the traveler in the dark thanks you for your tiny spark. How could he see where to go if you did not twinkle so? The darkness of space, the hidden counterpart of the sun, has been called Sophia among other names. The wisdom matrix of the universe, the dark matter that composes the substance of the cosmos, the great space CNET. Within organic life, this Sophia wisdom matrix, the dark matter, the black sun within every sun, is the pigment called melanin. Melanin is a molecule, a fragment of dark matter that is the origin for life. In every cell is the hidden counterpart of light, Sophia, which absorbs the wholeness of light's energy. In the cellular level is the same process as in the sun, conversion of hydrogen into luminous energy and the formation of matter around it. The color of light determines its properties, the effect it has on each cell's dark matter. The sun emits the full range of electromagnetic spectrum, the small visible range, that which is detected by the human eye, and the rest of the invisible light which cannot be detected by the human eye. The rainbow is the scattering of light into its spectral colors. The colors of the rainbow associated with it are only in the visible range. Dark matter may be compared as the element of void, of the nothingness that gives rise to all creation. Every cell of every organism contains some traces of melanin, often around the nucleus, essential for the production of energy. Melanin allows for the absorption of light in all its range of frequency and wave and particle. The process in the cell is identical as in the sun, the same exact molecule just on a different scale. Life imitates light. The energy absorbed provides the cell with a radiating sphere of hydrogen with high-energy electrons. The hydrogen comes from water in the cell. The molecule is split from its oxygen, and this cloud of energy expands to the entire cell in a hexagon-like sphere, supplying valuable electrons necessary for the rest of chemical reactions, such as ATP of the mitochondria. The energy comes first from the light and the melanin. Even in space, huge clouds of water float around as nebulae. The cell recreates this same process. The mystery of tumors and cancers, the truth about them, they are unstable dark matter growths. On the cellular level, happening day and night without ceasing, is the light and dark matter emitting energy. The exact same process as every star, only scaled down to granules within a cell. The same material, the same process. Cancer is a cosmic disease, one in which the dark matter absorbs the light of the body and expands. A biological organism cannot withstand that indefinitely. Its gravitational consumption, the collapsing of light in on itself. There is wisdom in cancer, the black hole that threatens to consume itself. It often starts from attracting misfortune, worry, and anxiety. It absorbs the light of fear. If left to consume, there may be moments of enlightenment. Too much wisdom sows destruction. What matters more than anything in the body is the light it receives. The first order of the formula for life is represented here as discovered by Dr. Arturo Solis Herrera. For every 2 water molecules, there are 4 hydrogen molecules, 2 oxygen molecules, and 4 high-energy electrons are produced. Thus, the color signature is paramount to balance in life. The color of radiation is important. Blue light is stimulating, such as the big sky above. At night, when blue light is not naturally present, the stimulation continues and the melanin absorbs this, staining it an unhealthy hue and preventing nightly repairs that are necessary to stop it from triggering its black hole consumption. The red light of fire is the easiest wavelength to see with. While associated with aggression, it is actually efficiency that it provides. The reason the soft glow of the campfire is reddish and not blue. It can be said that this is the natural radiation of light an organism is adapted to experience. Green light is relaxing, euphoric, analgesic, or pain-relieving. The green of supernatural experience, the phosphine of sleep, the verdant color of the forest after rain. So on for the entirety of the electromagnetic spectrum of light, visible and invisible. The dark matter absorbs it and runs it through the DNA code, the instructions for the mitochondria. The light of the sun is the first step of the food chain, the bringer of life. Everything the light touches is connected by this luminous electromagnetic energy. Melanin and light is how a star is formed. Melanin, light, water, and salt is the recipe for life. Put these elements in a closed terrarium and you will see life spontaneously generate. The light of every star whose path connects to the earth forms an unbroken bond, a tether of energy. The light is not an image billions of years old, but present, alive. This innervation responds immediately, reverberates to the source and receiver, a link. Much like 2 cups with a string attached to them, the vibrations can travel through the thread from one cup to another. The light of a star, once it reaches another, is now connected, and its activity is in the present moment. Within the sun, what happens on Earth vibrates along the beams of light to the sun and the sun to Earth. Every action under the sun affects it. A sacrifice, the stabbing and offering of a heart is an intense regulation of energy. The inner sun of an organism is destroyed, releasing its power back to the sun in an offering of assistance. This is no small act. The cell is a miniature sun and the heart is the largest cell. The axis of the heart is inclined at 23 degrees, the same as the axis of the earth to the path of the sun. The optic nerve is angled to the same adjustment, 23 degrees beneath the macula, the yellow spot in the center of the retina, resembling the sun, receives light images on the aperture of the iris. The heart contains melanin and is the primary emitter of energy and light in the body, as deep tissue cells require light as well. Because cells produce light, like the sun, the melanin has its energy internally sourced. When light is perceived from internal generation, it is called a phosphine. The sun is a phosphine of its own melanin core. The black sun, a black hole, dark matter, Sophia. Matter is transmuted light, forged into form. Light is the revealing of darkness, the nexus of energy for the Sophia wisdom, melanin dark matter of the galaxy that creates all things. The dark material fire of the black sun is decay. Where does the universe come from then? Nothing. When there is nothing, just void, there is no knowledge, no wisdom anywhere. The absence of everything. When such absence clumps together, the black sun forms. The phosphine is generated. Because dark matter is potential wisdom, hidden wisdom, nothingness. When a lot of nothing exists, it spreads out, the filaments reaching into the abyss of the alembic. The sea of darkness unfurled from its own potential. A lotus, the fruit of mycelial dark matter, black mold. Decay. Sophia. The dark matter net is the hyphae of a cosmic fungal body, for in the dark grows mold, as it ever was and shall be. Stare into absolute light, then absolute darkness. You will see for yourself these mysteries. Decay is a wonderful smith, transferring elements into one another. It makes such changes without respite until heaven and earth melt together into a glassy clump. Kirchwegger's Ora Catina, Homeri, 1781. There is always mold in holy places. It might even be said that holiness itself, the feeling, the concept as an experience, comes from mold. An encounter with mold in a sacred space are indiscernible in sensation. The vague familiarity, the stillness, the eerie creeping chills, the overwhelming, almost threatening violence, the divinity, the profanity. Whether mold took fragments of dark matter and created life, or dark matter itself is mold, remains unknown. Perhaps the dark matter is not the great body of a mycelium, but instead the web of a cosmic spider, or the corpse of a primordial dragon, a throne stretched across the universe, the cables of an angelic machine. In the shade of the invisible dark star, black mold grows. When there is enough of it, fire starts. As it does in the sun, as it does in the cell, the cycle of birth, decay, and rebirth. The same is true in outer space. Mold is alien, primordial, and oh so clever. Melanin is the wisest of all molecules, and black mold is the first to synthesize it. The whole universe owes itself to black mold. Look into the sun long enough and you will see it, the black mold sun in all its wisdom. Too long, though, spells destruction. It may be obvious at this point that fungus, mold specifically, is far stranger than all previous thought. The classification of fungus may not be accurate at all. You can't fear it, the sun that is. You have to face it at one point or another. Everyone is reaching for the sun, some deep in the pit, others bathing in its light. Dark matter can come from any part of the universe connected together as it is. Fragments of space from which life accumulates around. Life is made up of galaxy, built for itself unique forms as architects and artists. Under the black mold sun, nothing stays hidden for long, whether it is the light of the sun that shines or the creeping mold that whispers what it sees back to the black core of the sun. In the dark blue sky you keep, often through my curtains peep, for you never shut your eye till the sun is in the sky. The Shade of the Fairies. Drita patted her head where her crown hung around her head, gold shining like stars and dangling in the wind. She felt nervous with so many eyes on her, yet protected by the emblems of her tribe and her birthright that danced around her dress. Evil eye. The brew the woman in her family procured allowed the aperture on her senses to be blown open. She could hear the waves of sunlight wash over her, sending messages rippling through her body that she understood to be beyond time. She could smell the musty feathered coos of returning turtle doves in the sweltering heat, taste the young cedar in the sparks emerging from the fire on her skin, as they did when her father told her legends of the lands they came from. Hear the buzzing bloom of mushrooms along the forest edge, like the ones she had to spit out when her grandmother saw what she was chewing. She still felt she had one foot in this world, that she was sharper, but as the ceremony commenced, and she began to allow language to surround her like water, she slipped into currents that left her untethered. King Aegron took her elbow and connected eyes with her. He looked at her uncertainly, and she sighed and giggled, seeing the Zanat around him with furrowed brows and crossed arms, flustered that he was marrying her despite their warnings. She felt it wasn't her place to stop him either, that her fate, her aura, was sealed from the beginning. So they walked and made their way around the fire, the heat adding color to her cheeks. She was seeing webs of relations, the land heaving and people like grasshoppers transforming with these shifts. She could see movements from the other side, pushing people west and east, pulling by greed and lust. Their bodies moved to the rhythm of the drum, her heart resounding as her foot connected to the earth. She felt herself well up, dipping toward the ground while still being supported, as she remembered droves of men, sometimes determined to fight, sometimes determined to serve as protection of a possession, brides, families, livestock, land, and a truth that lies somewhere between. Aura, though mysterious, could serve to move masses of people in unity, and that fascinated her. There was an urgency within her, as her nose began to run, to cleanse the cycles of pain and torment, to bring unity across these lands and these people. She felt an upsurge, realizing that it was only the beginning, before she collapsed. She saw the Zanat again, as he lifted her to her feet. This time they were saying something to her, expressions open now, sharing in the urgency she had just felt. She couldn't hear them over the sound of the collective attention. It felt as if everyone was touching her at once. They began to tell her about the last time the Kul Shidra had not been seen for many years. The female dragon, her breasts hanging off her back as she wreaked havoc upon the earth, causing earthquakes, hailstorms, eruptions, an ice age, a massive flood. They pulled back the curtain for her, and she saw Kushildra dancing across the sky in the sunlight, streaking through the clouds. She saw her protection, and heard the Zanat tell her that she, like the Dragoi, the brave sons and daughters that would fight her, were also servants of the sun and the moon. They traced the paths for her, connecting the earth to the sun and moon, the path of the ecliptic, when they would all come together to decide the fate of Kushildra and the Dragoi. She began to tremble, uncertain, and met the eyes of Aegron, who brought her back to her feet. "Thank you," she whispered, closing her eyes and pressing them to his arm. His life flashed before her eyes. She saw him in the meeting with the earth, the sun, and the moon. Heroes and legends. A dragon can be anything, from the smallest worm to the greatest storm. They soar above and crawl below. They move in the flow of sinusoidal waves, snake-like. They are not energy or DNA, but can fly through them, occupy them. The north node is the point in space where the moon's orbit crosses the sun's apparent path and is called the head of the dragon. The south node is another point in space where the moon's orbit crosses the sun's apparent path and is called the tail of the dragon. When they meet, an eclipse occurs. Thus, the sun is swallowed by a dragon. They are not living in the same way as an organism. They are not spiritual either. It is best to think of them as their own thing. A dragon is a dragon. It is not a force of nature or an element, but they can be those things. Those become dragons. You can glimpse them in shadowy, stormy days where the sun is partially obscured. They phase through sine waves, but are not the waves themselves. The Neolithic dolmens and menhirs were constructed to connect with dragons, to summon them. They glide through electromagnetic fields. They play in the sun's surface and fly to Earth through openings in the Earth's magnetic field, when the sun and Earth's magnetic lines briefly reconnect. They create openings, gaps in the ionosphere that allow particles of the sun and dark matter to flow directly to Earth. Dragon passages. Flux transfer events form spiral or rope-like vortexes directly onto the Earth. They occur frequently and are transient, coming and going every few minutes on the day side of Earth. Dragons dive and soar through them. The primary religious practices of Neolithic and Paleolithic humans were that of dragon worship. The depiction was often of serpents, as the evolution of dragon imagery changes throughout time and culture. They do not have a form, of course, only the impression of their presence is felt, most often as a sine wave or snake movement. In the ultimate conclusion of every theory, when it becomes a theory of everything, when a strand of knowledge reaches its final iteration, the most extreme and absolute endpoint, it traces back to dragons. Everything converges on dragons in its last moments, regardless of the starting point or sort of information. In the furthest valley, up the tallest mountain, down the deepest rabbit hole, this will not be obvious at first, but when a theory runs its course, it will land on dragons. Rather, the dragon will make an appearance. The serpent energy is telluric currents, energy lines stemming from electromagnetic pulses. Neolithic temples were charged daily by the piezoelectric crystal particles in the stone and discharging daily. They formed vortexes and barriers, force fields, or batteries, depending on the design and position of the temples. DNA was a way for life to capture this dragon. Like microscopic stone temples, liquid crystal rock that uses a code of 64 pairs of 4 binary combinations. Long chains of information can be stored, accessed, and relayed across generations. Dragons flowing through time. DNA is 2 sine waves entangling, a liquid crystal with encoded information and electrically conducive. DNA is piezoelectric and triboelectric. Some experiences can change your very DNA when the dragons come. What we call electricity and magnetism is what dragons are, though that only describes their movement. A dragon can be anything, and they are not bound to electric energy. The answer to the alchemical question, what is eating you? Decay is. They will eat away at you until the DNA is consumed by a black hole. or until the dragon is unleashed and the mold is burned away and change can flow again. What really eats at you is dragons, the desire to be a hero. Bottled up, they will gorge themselves on themselves. They must be drawn up and out. In ancient shamanic and early agricultural communities, dragon worship remained at the crux of belief. There became a trend, however, in which the old religions were hedged out by a new era of gods. What often happened were dragon slayer myths, accounting for many of the rivalries between the newer and old ways. Although many dragons became demonized, that is not universal. Even in cultures where dragons were vanquished by heroes and gods, many remained integral to the religion. They were absorbed even as they were being eradicated. Dragons swim in the sun, in the red lightning storms of Saturn. The egg of nature, they call me, known to all the philosophers. Quicksilver or mercury fine. I am called an old dragon, an old man. I am everywhere, near and far. I fly away unless one binds me with measure. I have much of form, color, and shape. I carry in me the force of men and women. Heinrich Jamsthaler, Viatorum Spagiricum, 1625. A dragon is an alchemical and ontological beast. It appears around legends, legendary heroes, legendary dreams, legendary locations, legendary storms, legendary events, legendary days, legendary luck. Dragons are in legends. That is what they move through, become, any form in anything. In what is perhaps the oldest text describing dragons, the I Ching, more of their nature is revealed. The Book of Changes proposes that energy is formatted in yin and yang, or a binary relationship, equivalent to DNA codons, or a 0 and 1, of light and dark, of two dragons wrestling eternally for a pearl. The Book of Changes functions as an algorithm that characterizes situations and phenomena of life, the flow of energy with the understanding that energy is change. It pits these in an ever-evolving narrative, as the oracle contains no definite meaning, only the logic of energy that exists and permeates through the universe, divided into 64 hexagrams composed of either a yin line or a yang line, 4 combinations, as DNA. In the first hexagram of the I Ching, defined by the double trigram of heaven or origination, the hexagram formed is the creative principle. The 6 unbroken lines represent what is creative, penetrating, advantageous, unyielding. It explains the energy change that initiates all creation and destruction. Each line is a dragon, drawing the chariot at the proper time for those who set to accomplish through sublime success. The I Ching speaks in reference to the great man, one who is acting optimally in a given situation based on the wisdom of the oracle, how to act sensibly during the change, the movement of energy. The great man is represented by a dragon, symbolizing energy in nature. The movement of the heavens reveals transcendent power. The bottom line reads, "The dragon lies concealed in the deep. Action at such a time would be unwise." The second line reads, "The dragon appears in the field. It is a favorable time to see the great man." The third line reads, "The great man is active all day long. At nightfall his mind is full of care, danger, but not reproach." The fourth line reads, "The flight across the abyss is not sure. He who is resolute suffers no reproach." The dragon flies across the heavens. It is a favorable time to see the great man. The sixth line reads, "The dragon flies too high. There will be cause for repentance." Dragons weave in and out, transform into anything, occupy energy, move it around, snakes to and fro. The I Ching is a divination oracle that seeks to glimpse the movements of dragons. This form of characterizing information is the same as DNA. The recipe for the cell takes on calculations to act in accordance with necessity to find the sublime or superior operation during the flow of energy. As script, DNA is evolving, changing. It does not predetermine, it merely reveals possibility given the situation, just as the I Ching. DNA is not set in stone, but liquid crystal, and dragons course through DNA in moments of legend. DNA seeks to capture dragons. That is its purpose, to hold a space for them, allow them to course through. Recall this conversation between Tao Tao, a warlord poet, and Liu Bei, a charismatic and rival warlord. They plotted against each other at the same time they sought an alliance. Such was the nature of the harrowing intrigue in the romance of the Three Kingdoms. At one point, Tao Tao spots a dark cloud formation which looks like a dragon. As they lean on a balustrade in Tao's garden watching the cloud, Tao Tao asks, "What do you know about dragons?" "Not a lot," confesses Liu Bei. "Dragons, you know," says Tao Tao, "can be any size, either large or small. They can fly in the sky or disappear into the depths. Large, they can create clouds and pour forth mists. Small, they can disappear from sight altogether. Soaring up, they reach heaven itself. Sinking down, they lie at the very bottom of the sea. This is now springtime. This is the season when dragons rise to the occasion, like a man who wants to rule the whole world. These dragons are the greatest, just as heroes in any age are the greatest. Now, you are well-traveled. Who are the greatest heroes of our age?" Liu Bei knows he has to answer this very, very carefully so as not to stir up the anger or resentment of Tao Tao. "Yuan Shu?" he says cautiously. Laughing, Tao Tao replies, "Just old bones in a grave." "Yuan Shao?" To which Tao Tao responds, "Fierce, it's true, but weak. He likes plotting but hates making a decision. He wants to win but will never take the risks involved. But offer him something of minor significance and he will go all out for it. So I don't think he really is hero material, do you?" So Liu Biu asks about Liu Biao, a person with no reputation, snaps Tao Tao. "Sun Ce?" asks Liu Bei. "He just relies on his father's greater reputation," replies Tao Tao. "Liu Zhang?" ventures Liu Bei, only to be told, although of the royal family, he's just a dog guarding the gate. Then, in despair, Liu Bei rattles off a list of others, to which Tao Tao dismissively replies that they are of no significance at all. Finally, Liu Bei has to admit, "There's no one else I can think of." Smiling, Tao Tao leans forward, pointing his finger first at his guest and then at himself, saying, "The only heroes in the world are you and I." Liu Bei gasped, and the spoon and chopsticks rattled to the floor. Now just at that moment the storm burst with a tremendous peal of thunder and a rush of rain. Liu Bei stooped down to recover the fallen articles, saying, "What a shock, and it was quite close." "What, are you afraid of thunder?" said Tao Tao. Liu Bei replied, "The sage one paled at a sudden peal of thunder or fierce gust of wind. Why should one not fear?" Thus he glossed over the real fact that it was the words he had heard that had so startled him. Constrained to lodge in a tiger's lair, he played a waiting part. But when Tao Tao talked of breaking humans, then terror gripped his heart. But he cleverly used the thunder peal as excuse for turning pale. Oh, quick to seize occasions thus, he surely must prevail. Excerpts from the Journal of Dr. Hector Vasan, August 9th. August 10th. I had a dream last night. I don't remember falling asleep, but I did in my chair. Well, tonight really. I just checked the time, and it is only just after midnight. The house is boiling, and my old AC can't keep up. I'm drenched in sweat. No wonder. I was sitting in my armchair in front of my fireplace, with it lit in the middle of summer. Strangely, it is not my dream that is fleeting and vague, but my memory of yesterday afternoon. It is slowly coming back. I know my experience with Jane during our last session weighed heavily on my mind. I admit here, it concerned me. So with a half-joking, half-deadly serious notion, I think, I lit my fireplace. It is a gas one, and I don't remember the last time I used it. I had to relight the pilot flame. Once I did, I turned the knob to high. Then I must have settled into my armchair. The armchair is old, belonging to Dad, and I rarely sit in it. I admit it is set up facing the fireplace more as an amateur stylistic choice, since the rest of the living room furniture is centered around the 70-inch TV. The worn leather lets you sink deep into its embrace. I do not know how long I stared at the flames dancing amidst the fake logs behind the glass, but I believe I remember some of the thoughts. I am unsure of the train of thoughts until eventually I landed upon Thich Quang Duc, the Buddhist monk who killed himself in the 1960s. There is something striking and evocative about self-immolation. Is it the length of time, suicide by gun or falling, or quick measures compared to the agony of burning? I think, perhaps, it is the dramatic nature of a complete refutation of one's life. the fire scouring the fundamental pieces of life. When done and for a cause, the subject of the protest is contained within the body of the protester, who uses fire to cleanse the evilness. Does that make it an act of supreme hate? It must be, right? The protester is so vilely disgusted by whatever act that they offer their own body as the fuel to symbolically destroy the transgression. No matter how it is framed, consciously, deep down, only a fundamental contempt can explain this type of action. And it is not just hate against an idea or policy. Self-immolation occurs because the protester recognizes they, as a human being, are no different than the agents of the transgression. It must be tied to our subconscious understanding that the actions one protests are simply the decisions of another being. So burning oneself not only cleanses the idea, it destroys the human component that always makes up the action. No one self-immolates in protest against floods or hurricanes. No, it is against humans and our decisions and our actions, our deep, abiding self-loathing. When I stared at the flickering fire, uselessly trying to consume the fake logs, I considered how a Buddhist monk could be connected to Jane. I can clearly tell after our sessions that it wasn't love or fascination with fire that made her start those arsons. It was hate. Maybe it was many. Stress of work and school, expectations of family, drudgery of daily life. Jane burned the buildings as a subconscious acknowledgement of her dissatisfaction. In many ways, the arsons were external measures, but she is, at some level, burning herself away too. I can see it physically with her recent setbacks mentally. Something triggering this awakening of hate, but the source of it can't be the fire itself, right? I need to focus. I want to write down my dream before it fades. Though I can clearly recall the images, it is hard to put in words. I shall try. Incorporeal, bodiless, then flash, blinding light. Suddenly I am back in my body and not just me. Everything is back to what it is. Does that make sense? It's like every material object or being was gone before abruptly returning to its self. I am not in front of maybe a large pit. I'm tossing my stuff away, all my stuff. I think I feel good. Wailing, a lot of crying screams. It's not just stuff in my bin, but people, everyone I've ever met and known, including family. I'm tossing them into the pit. But it isn't really a pit. I think it is more like some type of shrine or temple. And the floor is acid and I'm melting even as I toss people into the acid. There is laughter, wild howling laughter, but it is not coming from me. I'm crying as I melt into the floor, but at least I'm at peace. I grabbed some ice water to cool down and reread about my dream. Kind of wish I did not. I suspect the unusual stress I felt during my most recent session with Jane has colored my subconscious imagination. But I feel all the connections I've made trying to understand the impetus for her pyromania do, in fact, have some sort of connection. The question of life, the masculine need to destroy what we create, the sinful act of creating, Frankenstein denouncing his progeny, Oedipus blinding himself, all of the demiurges malevolent to themselves and what they have produced. What connects them is, I'm realizing now, is fundamentally the same concept as the essence of fire. The spark which ignites the fire is at odds with itself. It is a fundamental, direct chemical reaction of entropy. It must hate itself, just like a virus must. All they do is race to obliviate what they are. Both consume their host, their fuel, even as they proliferate. Ultimately, they seek to destroy themselves. Without an external source to feed off of, they become inert, along with the source. It is entropy in purity. That's what the voice really wanted, a pure entropic state. Because the natural state of our universe is cold stillness. If that is natural, it must be right. Conversely, whatever exists must be evil, right? While fire is capable of disintegrating every trace of a person or their things, and is an acceleration towards that entropic state, it is not entropy. Am I realizing what the real demiurge is? Isn't the Big Bang, which spawned everything? It is akin to one giant fire, burning itself over billions of years, but burning itself out nonetheless. It is akin to one giant fire, burning itself over billions of years, but burning itself out nonetheless. There is no other way this ends. All fires burn out because the natural state of reality is dark and cold, so it is evil. It must hate itself, and we are all its Oedipal children. August 13th. Jane killed herself this morning, strangled herself with the bed sheets. I am not sure how I feel. Unfortunately, she has not been the first patient of mine unable to overcome her mental health problems. The funeral will probably be this weekend. I do not believe her family is religious. I feel like a failure, a stupid, useless psychologist. Dad was right. Really though, I think it is the superintendent's fault. He never listens to anyone, just over-medicates the patient so they feel like crap all the time. No wonder they kill themselves. I would. He's everything wrong with the previous generation of psychiatry. The old fart has been practicing too long, needs to retire or kick the bucket so modern medicine can actually help these sick people. I'm glad she is at peace. August 15th. I was driving home today when some asshole in a soccer van cut me off without warning. I can't stand people. Have they ever heard of turn signals? I was unbelievably mad. Just how inconsiderate can you be? Have you ever driven before? People like that need their license revoked. It was a van too, so probably had a bunch of kids inside. Yeah, great job racing to soccer practice on time, only caused an accident on the freeway. I wish. I was gripping my steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I was praying her reckless driving would cause an accident. Would show her. Act 6, Finale. Black Mold Sun. All we do is decay. What keeps our bodies together stops it from unraveling like strips of leather peeling off into the gloom parade. It is not the flesh, it is not the organs, nor the brain, nor skeleton, nor cell, nor atom. Light holds our bodies together, the binding agent of life. The salt and mercury is our blood and psyche, but these must be tempered by sulfur, the fire of your life, energy, the dreams you dream. Most people live entangled by the dreams of others, bound in knots and loops, desperate in searching for loopholes to jump through. The tethers offer security even as they suffocate us, trapped in a noose that tightens, but the fear of leaving overwhelms. Death is calling to any who wander through uncertainty. They love the earth, lament at its suffering, the wars and tragedy, the destruction of climate, the disease and famine. They claim to love the earth so much, but dare not step on it with bare flesh, afraid of their own shadow, for the sun is dangerous, screening their skin, shading their eyes. The kiss of the sun is cancer, they shout, and the cancer consumes, and the consumption it beckons death. Fear of death is worse than any death that has ever occurred. Death happens to the dead. Fear of death happens to the living. No one has ever died of cancer that wasn't afraid of the sun or of death. Look over the grass and flowers, insects and animals, and ask yourself, ask the sun, ask the wind, where is the cancer? The world outside is out to get you. They whisper, stay within the boundary of the noose, remain entangled, let your dreams be our dreams. Use our sulfur instead, not your own. Fear can consume its host, causing disease, sickness, a poison that spreads. The light that powers the fear is a black mold that festers inside. But so too can courage be therapeutic, healing, rejuvenating. The light purifies, shines powerfully, turns what is impossible to the possible. Alchemy. Even the worst decay, those who are underground and forlorn, inside a pitfall, they have the chance to burn like a wildfire, bright as a star. The greater the decay, the more intense the light that can burst. Now you see where all the stars of the galaxy come from. They were the least, the unworthy, the pitiful. The sulfur of your body is the light, the philosopher's stone is the dark matter. The transmutation is the process of converting light into matter, and matter into the molecules of the body. Fear is transmuted into a cell, providing it with energy. It feeds and feeds until it grows endlessly. This is cancer. The dark matter that comes from outer space present in our cells becoming a black hole when it should become a fiery dark star. To go outside the boundary, to disengage and disentangle, to forge anew from your own sulfur, the light in your eyes, the fire in your belly, the sun of your heart. Here, the mitochondria undresses itself from the dreams of others. It can power its own dream. The rite of passage, leaving the dark cave and entering the light, becoming a fire starter. That moment the sulfur becomes your own, the completion of the self, the work can begin. And when you die, and die you will, for death is inescapable, the the light you shined can be carried by dragons to join the stars. The death of a great king, a fallen hero, a legend, they become stars. The melanin, which is the fragments of dark matter that pervades the entire universe, attracts to space when the alchemical gold of the self is complete. Not as a return to source, not to become one again or find eternal paradise, nor a break from some reincarnation cycle. Melanin, dark matter, is the most stable molecule in the universe, and the sulfur you seared into it bears your name, and that name makes the whole world tremble as it ascends and takes its place among the stars. All we do is decay, living under a black mold sun, but in between the decay is life. Will you be consumed by the black hole, or burn as your own dark star? As your bright and tiny spark lights the traveler in the dark, though I know not what you are, twinkle, twinkle, little star. The Shade of the Fairies. You're late, my child, her aunt nearly whispered, though her words resounded through the cave. The gentle sternness awakened visions of her father. You couldn't have gathered herbs for Agron and I, not with the cold we had. Won't this moon do? He wasn't here. He had been taken off to Issa. Drita, this moon is in blood. Take a look for yourself. Sure enough, pink began to tint its pallor. With hope in her voice, Drita asked if perhaps blood meant to allow for flow again. Her aunt told her to sit as she revealed the ivory board. The crab of cancer took Drita's eye for a moment, glinting in the light of the oil lamp, as Artemisia began. With Prende and Rodoni in the underworld, the weavers of your fate don't look kindly upon you. They are made invisible under the beams of the sun, and with that strengthened position of core in the sun's sector of the sky, you may have Medoros on your side, defending Hana's position, though you will have to act fast as it will quickly cross into the bounds of the lion-hearted one. Aunt handed her a basket of herbs laden with mullein, marshmallow, and licorice root, as well as mugwort and berries mysterious to Drita. As her aunt spoke, she began to question whether an herbal treatment would be enough and sought further counsel. If you believe there is a reason for concern, particularly regarding the moon, you may want to visit the Oracle of Apollonia. She'll help soothe your desires. Quickly, carefully, though uncharitable, it is the time between the Vittori where fate may change. Also, do not forget to cleanse yourself in the fires on the day of summer. Within 2 days, Drita reached the eternal fire of the Nymphaeon, emerging from a stone outcropping. The sight was ethereal as much as it was unsettling, surrounded by fertile earth at the foot of the Iusa River. As she approached, the oracle sang with a double voice, and she couldn't help but think of the back of the Apollonian coin she traded, Medusa's hair with snakes engulfing her face. Before she could begin, the oracle mentioned briefly that questions regarding marriage or death were impermissible. Though she knew this, the fire and heavy smell of asphalt stirred the images years ago from her matrimony, and it was then that Drita wondered if death was on the table. Seeking relief, not just from the burden of doubt and fear, but the onerous smell, Drita set down the incense with great anticipation. The fire curiously traveled toward the offering, halting just before as if for further inspection, and finally fanned out, encasing the incense in a rolling, unfurling round of smoke. With that, Drita took a drink from the fountain, allowing the water to carry her wishes. She left the oracle with coins, Abri mead for her fertility, and a sacrificial goat for the divine protection of King Igron, though they felt delicate in the waning light of the moon. Heroes and Legends. The hero's journey and the rites of passage throughout life are the tales of the mitochondria and nature and dreams that house and supply, as that of a hearth, the alchemy, talents, abilities, skills, spirit, magic of the body, the energy that completes the circuit of your being and allows you to live life undaunted. As a fully complete person, they are the stories of light and dark matter, of fire and dragons. People obsess with their own diseases and pain. It becomes them. The most interesting part of them, the thing that makes them unique and provides the excuse to remain inadequate. They convince themselves that it is a gift, a savant syndrome for their whole being and the pattern they live their life in. And then everyone trauma bonds together for fear of the sun and their own light. There is guilt in leaving, guilt in healing, guilt in stepping out of the cave, guilt in taking credit, guilt in one's passion or talent being better than another.
There's nothing interesting about a sick person. Anyone can get sick. Few have the courage to heal, to fire up their forge and form their own unique mitochondria, stepping into their power and wielding it with the fierceness of a dragon. Afraid to dream, living in the dark side of the sun. You can learn to see dragons sailing through the collapsar mists of the universe, between the cells and dreams, between mountain and oceans, across planets and events. And for those doggone dog days you thought would never end, and sleepless nights where you never sleep, you look up and, behold, there is nothing. Remember this. The dragon flies and drags on dragonflies. But these words echoed, bounced from sun to moon, back and forth across past and present, through the halls of legends and the breath of dragons that burned into the brain words and the picture of their meaning. The life we could live. The only heroes in the world are you and I. Excerpts from the journal of Dr. Hector Vasan. Undated. Goddamn deck. It's a colossal failure. Piece of garbage construction, right in the center, and the best spot to put my chair and sit to read outside is this awful creak. It drives me crazy every time. It's brand new. How could it possibly be creaking so loud? It is just like my old house, always creaking. How is anyone supposed to live like this? I bet he's laughing from his swindling. Probably made a lot of money on the cheap-ass construction. All it's good for is kindling. Yeah, kindling. I'm gonna burn it down. The house, the damn deck, all of it. Make a nice, big summer bonfire. That'll be a party. I should invite that piece of shit contractor. All I wanted was a nice backyard deck. How hard could it be? Do your job right. Seriously, how would he like if someone took a big crap over his dreams? He is filth, just like the superintendent giving poor Jane shitty pills to drive her to suicide, like all the bad drivers on the road every single day. Everything they make is broken because they're broken on the inside. I don't know what went wrong with these people, but they're sure as hell passing it on to their bratty kids. Nah, screw this. I'm gonna bring the party to him, go to his house. Make a big ol' hungry bonfire with huge roaring flames that will eat all he owns and loves, spitting out chalky ash. That's what people like him deserve. And when the flames start crackling, I'll be the one laughing. God, I hope his family's locked inside. Epilogue. The Shade of the Fairies. The wailing that filled her ears felt so foreign, she could barely tell it was coming from her own body. Her voice led several others in a lament of the story of his life. King Aegron's fate drawn to one light, son of Pleratus, crane of the night. The sun agrees, blackened with sorrow. Your home aches for you for a million tomorrows, with the force of a ram and the grace of a stag. Not even the Aetolians could stamp out the fire in this man. No, something glittering and distant. The Zana, his fate, coiled between lovers and reprobates. Her ears rang as her eyes poured unhampered, and she received visions of the weeks to come. She saw the dolmen they would erect, amongst a landscape burnished to mirror the sky of his birth, the pillars of lights along the mountains, summoning the roaring Kulshidra from the depths of the earth. With such an immense sound, she would swallow the 7 rivers of Razan. This was not even her at her full power. She saw Razan's hub of trading and seafaring fade away with the collapse of Aegron's time here. Drita also felt the shifting tides of emotions, her contemplated suicide, wondering if she had intervened with Aegron's fate, accelerating his death and bringing a traitor to advance on his name. It was the reassertion of her oath that brought her to forgiveness of both her actions and those she witnessed. The grief of the land, and the ways it sought regulation, as well as its people, continuing to pursue and meddle to satisfy individual interests. Drita returned to the poplar tree, burying beside his clippings a lock of his hair. She whispered to the bees that he was gone, and she saw them drop before flying back, orienting to spread the news. One flew right up to her face, and as she turned, it hovered above her head, emanating the words, "Pas Drita." She considered the way she now felt responsible to carry on Aegron's legacy, and the vision they shared for a unified people against the Romans, Aegeans, and Aetolians.
where all cycles might converge under a memory that reached back before her ancestors remembered coming there. It was a vision that made apparent the rulers were less relevant than the light its free peoples held true. You may not remember me by name, and still you may not remember my story and those just beyond your consciousness. However, they are so closely knitted with your own story that truly forgetting is not of your capacity. You need only to look closely within. "100 souls. In every day there are 100 suns. Can you find them all? Suns that form dappled halos, brilliant gossamer threads, blinding opalescence, moon bows and diaphanous shreds peeking through chatoyance and argent light, suns that coalesce in the lambent of a campfire, breathtaking auroras and candle vigils, concerts and fireworks, lanterns and bonfires, the apricity of a winter sun, silhouettes outlining figures and elusiform sprites." In Japanese, Komorebi describes the soothing sunlight through trees. In Turkish, Gumuservi is the moonlight shining on water. Kajub in Humang is the gentle illumination of the sun dissolving the early morning mist. Yobi in Korean is the fox rain, a sun shower where the rain falls while the sun is shining. Gegenschein, a faint brightening visible in the night sky's anti-solar point, the furthest from the sun, caused by sunlight backscattering by interplanetary dust, a counterglow. The Swedish Magata, or moon path, is the wavy strip of moonlight reflecting off a body of water. Arabic Nur is the heatless light of heavenly enlightenment. Sanskrit Prakasa is ambient consciousness, a divine presence of light. Kelvin in scientific terms is the color temperature of light. Still, light refracts, dims, dazzles, projects. There are thousands of words for light and ways to describe its movement, intensity, the feelings it evokes, the setting it's cast in. The little suns hidden in the day streak, glint, blaze. Light can be glossy, murky, spectral, opaque. Light can have luster, patina, polish, glare. Every single one of those descriptions of light can enter and pass through you, be used for energy, transfer information, and inspire. More than that, you can produce all those lights internally in your cells, the phosphenes of the soul inside. The way light unveils the darkness of space is as important. It affects the experience, the kind of wisdom revealed. No two lights are the same, just as no two spaces are the same, nor even occupy the same space in the universe as the solar system sails. Look to the night sky. Every single star twinkling in the deep above is another name for light. Light's changing properties of wavelength, luminescence, position, evolution, even the information it uncovers. Yet, all take a seat before its ethereality. Light takes no space, despite revealing that space. The photons and waves of light, the radiation, it is not physical, not composed of matter, but what all things are required to be matter. Every planet and constellation whose light reaches this world exists simultaneously in every cell of every organism from plant to person. Every sun fits its light in every creature. Whole galaxies emitting their wisdom can be contained in a single cell, are contained in every cell. The sun is new every day. 100 souls orbit you. Drink them to your fill. Absorb their galaxy into your dark matter where Sophia and the wolf combine to light the fire of dragons. And who am I, you ask? The old man scratched at his beard. Well, I'm just the space between heaven and earth. They call me the horizon. I've been here longer than you know. I've seen it all, and I'll be waiting for you to reach me. The old man prepared to leave after hesitant rumination. He turned and spoke one final utterance. We are what we are, and dragons is what we are. Light up the world and take your place among the stars. The fire flickered dead, the gust howled open the window shutters, and the choir of rattling pots and pans shook the foundations. A blur of light blinded the inside room. In the next moment the old man vanished, like the dewdrop waterdrop blitz on a chlorophyll-filled leaf during the golden embrace of a glorious flaming sunrise. The day tallied 365,250,000. and one.